Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of the Parente family. William Michael Parente was born on July 20, 1949, in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. His parents, Willie and Roolin Parente, raised him with values rooted in their family's history of law enforcement. His father, a New York trooper, played a significant role in shaping his upbringing. As an only child, William received his parents' undivided attention. He spent summers enjoying the sun with his family in Long Beach. William pursued his education at Brooklyn College and Brooklyn Law School, thanks in part to the financial support of his uncle, Anthony J. Russo. William worked in his uncle's Manhattan law office on the Avenue of the Americas. There, he built a reputation as a thoughtful lawyer and dedication to his family. William was known for his demeanor, courteous, which extended to everyone. He worked diligently for long hours, but made sure not to overwork himself. Unlike many of his peers, he refrained from using profanity or engaging in post-work gatherings for drinks. His disciplined lifestyle and commitment to kindness set him apart in the legal community. Even on difficult days, William maintained his composure and treated everyone with respect. In 1977, after being admitted to the New York bar, William married Betty Mazzarella. He began his career at a prestigious Wall Street law firm but made a significant change in 1988. When Betty became pregnant with their first child, William decided to start his own private practice. This change happened around the same time the family moved to Garden City, New York, an affluent community in Nassau County, Long Island. Despite living in the suburbs, the William family remained connected to their Brooklyn roots. They regularly returned to their old neighborhood to enjoy local delicacies, reconnect with old friends, visit their mother, and relive cherished childhood memories. By the time he was 60, William Parente had become an experienced estate and tax attorney. He ran his practice from an office in a Queens shopping center. His wife, Betty Mazzarella, 58, dedicated her time to taking care of their home and organizing charity fundraisers in their local community. Betty was actively involved in church activities, which were an integral part of their neighborhood's social fabric. The couple had two daughters, Stephanie and Catherine. Stephanie, the elder daughter, was 19 years old and a sophomore at Loyola College, studying speech pathology with plans to pursue dentistry in the future. Her friendly nature made her well-liked by her classmates and teachers. She also maintained close relationships with her friends back home in Garden City. Their younger daughter, Catherine, showed remarkable talent at just 11 years old, earning her admiration from teachers and staff at Garden City Middle School. Her exceptional abilities indicated a promising future ahead. In the later stages of his legal career, William became involved in what he called bridge loans. He acted as a financial intermediary, similar to a bank, allegedly using assets from investment portfolios under his management to finance these loans. When an investor asked for their money back, William Parente was unable to return the funds or explain why he couldn't. On April 15, 2009, William, along with his wife Betty and youngest daughter Catherine, took a trip to visit their eldest daughter Stephanie in Towson, planning to surprise her. They booked room 1029 at the Sharon Hotel, near the Talone Town Center Mall, with a reservation until the 19th. When they arrived, Stephanie's friend was surprised, given that classes had just resumed after the Easter break and Stephanie was busy preparing for a chemistry exam. The visit was unexpected, especially since the parents had already planned to visit on Friday the 17th to discuss Stephanie's study abroad plans in England. Despite the initial surprise, the visit seemed like a normal family reunion. However, what took place that day remains unclear. Based on the evidence, here is what happened. Betty Mazzarella Parente was the first victim. She was brutally assaulted and suffocated in bed on Sunday morning. Later, Catherine, the youngest daughter, met a similar fate, dying from the same violence as her mother. Catherine's body was placed beside her mother's. On Sunday afternoon, Stephanie arrived at the hotel after leaving her campus and tragically met the same demise as her mother and younger sister. Her body was laid beside theirs on the bed. None of the victims showed signs of struggle. No evidence of drugging or physical restraint was found. William Parente carefully planned the annihilation of his family. On that somber Sunday, around midnight, one of Stephanie's close friends and roommates grew worried about her absence from their dorm room. After hours of worrying, the roommate called the hotel room phone to reach Stephanie. The roommate knew Stephanie planned to return to the dorm to study for final exams, so they were surprised when William Parente, Stephanie's father, answered the call. William explained that Stephanie was staying at the hotel with family. The roommate accepted this excuse and ended the call, unaware that Stephanie was already dead. Later, the roommate thought back on the conversation and remembered that William's tone seemed unusual. On Monday morning, William Parente ended his life by using a knife he had bought at a nearby mall. He inflicted fatal injuries on himself in the hotel bathroom. When the family failed to check out, hotel staff became concerned. School Loyola College also raised concerns about Stephanie's unexplained absence from classes, especially since it was a crucial time for her final exams. The college contacted the hotel, requesting a welfare check on Stephanie and her family. At 3 p.m., a housekeeper tried to enter their 10th floor room but found the door locked and received no response. The housekeeper alerted other staff, and a hotel manager entered the room. The manager found William Parente's lifeless body in the bathroom, having taken his own life with a knife. The manager quickly called emergency services and continued to investigate. As he entered the room further, he found 3 bodies carefully arranged on one of the beds. The victims were Betty Mazzarella and her 2 daughters, Stephanie and Catherine. The Baltimore County Police were immediately called to the scene, and all other guests on the 10th floor were relocated as part of the investigation. The police also took the family's Mercedes-Benz SUV from the hotel parking lot. After investigating, they determined that William Parente had committed a murder-suicide on that Sunday. And the police found that the causes of death were asphyxiation and blunt force trauma. They believe that Betty and Catherine were the first victims, followed by Stephanie. The police think that one of William's last interactions was with Stephanie's boyfriend, who tried to call Stephanie around midnight. However, Stephanie had already been killed by her father by then. Shortly after the call, William likely went to the bathroom and took his own life using a knife he had bought earlier from the mall. It is believed that William Parente's decision to kill his family and then commit suicide may have stemmed from an investigation into his possible involvement in a major fraud. William Parente was accused of being part of a Ponzi scheme, a type of investment scam where money from new investors is used to pay existing ones, often resulting in huge financial losses. Investors have been scammed of around $20 million, with one investor claiming a loss of $450,000. Investigations showed that William had issued bounced checks totaling $245,000 to investors, leading to further complaints to the New York Attorney General's office. After William Parente's death, some investors came forward with losses totaling millions of dollars. A colleague of William's made a poignant observation: financial losses can be recovered, but the loss of human life is irreparable. Friends and family have struggled to overcome their feelings of grief following the horrific incident. A memorial service was held at Loyola College on Monday night to honor Stephanie's memory. The family William Parente home, once full of life, became a somber space filled with tributes such as flowers and candlelit vigils. A funeral service was held at St. Joseph's Church in Garden City to commemorate Betty and her daughters. According to reports, Catherine's middle school classmates were transported by bus to attend the service. Stephanie's college peers made a significant effort to join, driving from Talon and arriving as early as 4 a.m. for the morning ceremony. The family was laid to rest together at St. Charles Cemetery in East Farmingdale, New York. In contrast, William Parente received a separate, private funeral service at a different location. He was cremated, but the location of his ashes was not publicly disclosed. The horrific actions of this merciless perpetrator have caused immense distress for the victims and their loved ones. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Gabriela Alcaino. Gabriela Alcaino was born on May 17, 2001, in Santiago, the capital city of Chile. She was the only child of Federico Alino and Carolina Donosa Campos, and the first grandchild in a large, close-knit family. Her paternal uncle, Rodrigo, who served as her godfather, and her grandfather, Carlos, both adored her deeply, with Carlos regarding her as the central figure in his life. Gabriela grew up in a loving and supportive environment, despite her family's modest means. Her parents, though not wealthy, worked hard to provide her with a good education and upbringing. When Gabriela was 5, her parents divorced, and she lived with her mother, who dedicated herself to raising her. Her father, however, remarried and had 2 younger sons, but he continued to support Gabriela and her mother financially and remained involved in her life. Gabriela was a sweet and friendly child, who was a bit shy but made friends easily. Her gentle nature and lovely appearance earned her admiration from those around her. She excelled academically, enjoyed music, dance, and art, and her parents encouraged her talents. Gabriela cherished her relationships with her younger half-brothers, spending quality time with them at her father's nearby home during weekends and holidays. Overall, Gabriela's childhood was a happy and carefree time, filled with love and support from her family. Gabriela's first love was at the age of 15. She fell for Fabian Chasis Aravan, a fellow student who was a year older. At first, their relationship was innocent and sweet. They would walk together, share ice cream, and steal kisses. Fabian came from a good family with well-respected parents who valued education and raised him to be a good person. However, Fabian was a quiet and private person who struggled with social interactions. He would avoid eye contact and turn away from others, leading many to think he was just shy. Gabriela's father met Fabian and thought he was a calm, dependable, and responsible young man. He had a serious talk with Fabian, asking him to take care of Gabriela, and Fabian promised to do so. Initially, Fabian made an effort to be attentive and caring. However, as time passed, a different side of Fabian emerged. He became controlling and cruel, revealing a darker aspect of his personality. Fabian's controlling behavior dominated the relationship. He was intensely jealous and dictated who Gabriela could and couldn't interact with. He monitored her phone activity, insisting on instant responses to his calls and messages, regardless of the time. If she failed to comply, he would throw tantrums, displaying childish and abusive behavior. During the first 6 months of their relationship, Gabriela attempted to downplay Fabian's frequent outbursts of anger and jealousy, believing they would eventually subside. Blinded by her love for him, she tried to meet all his demands and held on to the hope that he would revert to the caring and gentle person she initially fell in love with. Fabian's behavior became increasingly irritable, volatile, and aggressive. He emotionally drained Gabriela, progressing from verbal abuse to physical mistreatment. He would slap her, pull her hair, or grab her hands, often leaving no visible marks. However, bruises would occasionally appear on her wrists and shoulders, evidence of Fabian's rough handling. Gabriela tried to hide her situation, but her loved ones noticed her depressed state and frequent tears. She was no longer her usual cheerful and outgoing self, instead withdrawing from friends and avoiding contact with people Fabian had forbidden her from seeing. Gabriela repeatedly tried to end her relationship with Fabian, but he would not let her go. Despite her efforts to break free, he would pressure her into getting back together. This cycle of breaking up and reuniting continued for over a year, marked by Fabian's stalking, threats, and harassment. In 2017, Fabian got into trouble for physically attacking a classmate outside of school. Although the details of the incident were unclear, he was accused of mistreatment and assault, which could have led to jail time. However, the case was settled out of court, and Fabian was expelled from school. He was forced to complete his education through homeschooling. When Gabriella finally decided to end the relationship for good, Fabian became angry and desperate. He apologized and promised to change, begging her to take him back. However, when she refused, he began to stalk and harass her. He would show up at her school or home, even attempting to climb into her room through the window. He bombarded her with dozens of calls, texts, voice messages, and social media messages, trying to intimidate her into resuming their relationship. Gabriella was determined to end the relationship, despite Fabian's erratic behavior. His messages veered wildly from apologetic to threatening, but she remained resolute. However, Fabian's actions were unpredictable and frightening. He would often vanish for weeks, giving Gabriella a glimmer of hope that he had moved on, only to reappear and resume his harassment. Fabian's behavior was relentless and intrusive. He would follow Gabriella everywhere, showing up unexpectedly and causing public scenes. His outbursts were loud and intimidating, leaving Gabriella feeling anxious and fearful. As a result, she became reluctant to be alone, always seeking the company of friends or family after school. She would often meet her mother at work and travel home with her, or ask her father or uncle to accompany her on trips. This constant vigilance took a toll on Gabriella, leaving her exhausted and drained over several months. A devastating series of events began to unfold for the Alcano family when a burglar broke into the home of Federico's second wife, taking her life in a tragic turn of events. At the time, the children were at school and Federico was at work, leaving her alone and vulnerable. Fortunately, the perpetrator, a neighbor with a prior conviction, was apprehended immediately. Gabriella and her mother rallied around Federico, offering emotional support and helping him care for the children during this difficult time. Although Gabriella's thoughts were temporarily diverted from Fabian, who had gone missing around the same time, she remained focused on her own goals. She was busy preparing for entrance exams, hoping to secure a spot at one of Santiago's most prestigious universities, where she aspired to study journalism or advertising. However, this tragedy was only the beginning of a series of heartbreaking events that would soon befall the Alcano family. In May 2018, Fabian suddenly re-emerged, beginning a campaign of obsessive stalking that made Gabriella feel unsafe in all aspects of her life. He was able to access her property by climbing over the fence and even showed up at places she regularly visited, such as the supermarket and the mall. By early June, Gabriella was so alarmed by his behavior that she sent screenshots of her disturbing messages with Fabian to her two closest friends, including audio recordings where he explicitly threatened her and demanded they restart their relationship. Gabriella was secretly living in fear for her own safety and that of her loved ones, but she chose not to share her concerns with her family to avoid causing them unnecessary worry. On June 10, 2018, the Alino family came together to celebrate a milestone birthday, Carlos's 80th. Tragically, this joyful gathering would turn out to be the last day of life for Gabriella and her mother, Carolina. The evening had begun on a happy note, with the house filled with laughter, music, and the warmth of a big family meal. As they celebrated Carlos's special day, everyone wished him good health and many more years to come. Gabriella played with her younger brothers and her uncle Rodrigo's children, but despite the festive atmosphere, she seemed somewhat preoccupied and distant. Her uncle noticed her unease and decided to approach her, asking if everything was okay and if something was troubling her. Gabriella gave a sad smile and shrugged, but didn't explain why she was nervous. Her uncle chose not to pry, thinking she would open up when she was ready. However, He later regretted not pressing her for more information. After the party, Federico drove his ex-wife and daughter home. He kissed Gabriella on the forehead, told her he loved her, and reassured her that she could always count on him for support. He then returned home with his younger children. Tragically, this was the last time he saw his eldest daughter and first wife alive. In the early hours of June 11th, a horrific crime took place. Fabian, armed with a hunting knife, climbed over the fence of his ex-girlfriend's house. He planned to sneak into Gabriella's bedroom through the window and attack her. However, just as he was about to enter, the lights turned on, and the back door creaked open. Carolina, who had been unable to sleep, had gotten up to investigate the noise. Fabian pounced on her, pushing her back inside, and began stabbing her repeatedly. Fabian brutally stabbed his Carolina 36 times, with most of the wounds inflicted on her chest, neck, and head. This attack was fatal and left her with no chance of survival. Carolina only managed to scream a couple of times before falling silent. The noise from the attack woke up Gabriella, who rushed downstairs to see what was happening. As she went down, she saw Fabian, covered in blood and clearly enraged. He caught hold of her and dragged her down. Gabriella was desperately trying to call the emergency services with her phone, but she couldn't make the call. In a horrific act, Fabian attacked Carolina and stabbed her once in the chest, piercing her heart and instantly killing her. He then moved her body to the kitchen. After the murder, Fabian tried to cover his tracks by wiping away his fingerprints and cleaning the bloody footprints. He also washed himself and the knife in the bathroom. After cleaning up, Fabian left the house quietly around 5:30 a.m. without being noticed by the neighbors. Following the event, Federico appeared unaffected. However, concerns grew when Carolina, typically a reliable and communicative colleague, missed work for 2 consecutive days without answering her phone. Her employer contacted Federico, asking him to find out what had happened to Carolina. When questioned, Federico was surprised and claimed to have called Carolina, but she was unreachable, as was Gabriella, whose phone was off. Next, Federico phoned his brother, Rodrigo, but Rodrigo stated that he had neither seen nor heard from the missing individuals since their friend's birthday. Following the phone call, Federico decided to pay a visit to Carolina's home. The property appeared uninhabited. Nonetheless, Carolina's vehicle remained in the garage. Without forcibly entering, despite possessing a spare key, Federico merely checked on the status of the property. Federico called the police and asked them to check the house, but he didn't enter himself because he was afraid of what he might find. The police officers were puzzled by this, especially since he had a key. When they finally entered the house at 11 a.m., they found the lifeless bodies of Carolina and Gabriella on the kitchen floor, surrounded by pools of blood. Despite the obvious fact that the women had been dead for over a day, Federico was overcome with grief and irrationally demanded that the police call an ambulance to save them. The police had to calm Federico down, but his behavior raised suspicions, and they took him outside to a police car for questioning. When he tried to leave the car and found the door locked, he became agitated and demanded to know why. It was then that he realized he was the main suspect in the double homicide. Federico was shocked and devastated by this turn of events, unable to comprehend how he could be suspected of killing his own daughter. Rodrigo arrived shortly after and was equally shocked to learn that his brother had not been released. He was also struggling to come to terms with the investigation revealed that Gabriella's friends reported that she was being stalked by her ex-boyfriend, Fabian. Screenshots of his threatening messages and voice recordings, which included a disturbing phrase, "It's easier to take her life than to let her go," were also obtained. This came as a shock to Federico, Gabriella's father, who recalled that Fabian seemed pleasant when they first met, despite his daughter's failed attempts to break up with him. The contrast between the heinous crime and the normalcy of Fabian's daily life where he spent time with family and friends and posted light-hearted photos on social media, made his crime all the more inconceivable. After being taken into custody, Fabian responded to allegations with pretended astonishment and anguish, falsely claiming his innocence and feigning affection for Gabriella. Fabian had gotten rid of the object used to commit the murder and thrown away some clothes with blood on them. However, there were still small drops of blood on his shoes, and footprints matching his shoes were found at the scene of the crime. Additionally, 4 of Gabriella's classmates said they heard Fabian threaten her, saying it would be easier to kill her than let her go. Because of the evidence and what the witnesses said, Fabian admitted to the crime, but tried to make himself look like a lover who was deeply hurt. The defendant claimed that his intention was not to harm Gabriella, but rather to have a conversation with her. However, the situation escalated, and he ultimately treated her mother as an unwanted witness. He struggled to provide a reasonable explanation for bringing a hunting knife to the encounter, which was supposedly meant to be a conversation. Following the autopsy and other necessary examinations, the victims' bodies were released to their family for burial. A large crowd gathered at the funeral to pay their respects to the deceased and offer condolences to their loved ones. Gabriella was laid to rest in a white dress she had always wanted to wear but never had the chance to. Coralina was buried in a closed casket due to the severe mutilation of her face. Fabian's family hired a skilled lawyer who developed a strong defense strategy, aiming to secure a minimal sentence for his client. During the initial court hearings, the lawyer highlighted Fabian's young age and clean record, pointing out that the attack on his classmate had been resolved outside of court. However, the victim's family pushed for a more severe charge of femicide, which was rejected by the prosecution due to the specific requirements of Chile's law. Since Fabian and the victim were not in a romantic relationship at the time of the crime, the case did not meet the criteria for femicide. The lawyer also argued that Fabian had acted on impulse and was in a state of distress when he committed the crime. As a result, Fabian faced a potential 15-year sentence for the double homicide and assault charges. The victim's family, understandably, demanded the maximum punishment for Fabian. After the initial hearings, the judge gave both the prosecution and defense 6 months to gather evidence. Fabian's lawyer requested his release pending trial, but the judge denied this request, keeping Fabian in custody. Gabriella's father was furious. He lost 2 loved ones to violent deaths. Now, the person responsible for the murders of his ex-wife and daughter might receive a lenient sentence. The defense lawyer tried to blame the victims, and the authorities seemed willing to accept this excuse. In response, Gabriella's father and uncle, along with women's rights groups, proposed Gabriella's Law. This law would broaden the definition of femicide to include intimate partner violence, regardless of whether they was married or cohabiting. The National Office for Women and Gender Equality soon joined the cause, actively pushing for the law. Although the bill faced opposition due to concerns that it could lead to new charges and stricter penalties for perpetrators already in prison, feminist groups nationwide rallied behind the Alino family. They organized marches and demonstrations in support of Gabriella's Law. In August 2019, a year and 3 months after the tragic murders, significant changes were made to Chile's femicide law. Known as Gabriella's Law, these amendments aimed to strengthen the country's response to violence against women. The law now defines femicide as any act of violence, injury, or murder committed against a woman due to hatred based on her gender, regardless of the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator. Additionally, the law considers it an aggravating circumstance if the victim is a minor or has health issues. In April 2022, Fabian Series went on trial for attacking his ex-girlfriend and her mother 4 years earlier. Thanks to Gabriella's Law, the defense had limited options. Fabian was charged with femicide under aggravating circumstances because one of the victims was a minor, as well as with double homicide and assault. On April 20th, He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the verdict was delivered, Federico and Rodrigo spoke to the court, expressing their gratitude to the judges for their fair decision. They acknowledged that no punishment could restore the life of their loved ones, Carolina and Gabriella, but emphasized that a life sentence for the perpetrator would serve as a safeguard, protecting other women from suffering a similar tragic fate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lisa Harnum. Lisa Cecilia Harnum was born on June 12, 1981, in the Toronto suburbs of Canada as the second child in her family. She was raised alongside her older brother Jason, with whom she has always been very close. Their single mother, Joanna, brought them up independently. Since their father left the family when they were very young and played no further role in their lives, Lisa and her brother had no memories of him. From an early age, Lisa grew up to be an active and purposeful girl. She participated in sports with her brother, attended martial arts classes, and enjoyed playing soccer and volleyball. However, her true passion was ballet, which she practiced at the dance studio for several hours daily. As a tall and slender child, Lisa's professional ballet training required a strict diet, which unfortunately had a detrimental effect on her growing body. During adolescence, Lisa developed anorexia as a result of her eating disorders. For a long time, she kept her problem hidden, believing she could overcome it alone. However, when her weight dropped to critically low levels, her mother intervened and had Lisa hospitalized for several months to recover and gain weight. After graduating, she pursued dancing classes and decided to enter the beauty industry. Alongside her university studies, she worked as a perfumer at a large cosmetics chain store, and in her free time, studied makeup and hairdressing techniques. When she turned 24, Lisa moved to Australia in 2005, driven by a desire for drastic change. She wanted to escape to a warmer climate and explore the world. On a one-year work visa, Lisa traveled to another continent. Her mother, Joanna, accompanied her for the first few months to ensure a smooth transition. Once satisfied that her daughter was settled, Joanna returned to Toronto, confident that Lisa could take care of herself. Lisa settled in Sydney, renting a cozy apartment, and soon landed a job at a small local cosmetology company. Once her visa expired, she made the decision to make Australia her permanent home. To achieve this, she first extended her stay for another year, and then began preparing the necessary documents required to obtain Australian citizenship. Lisa faced challenges in her personal life, partly due to her preference for older men, possibly stemming from her absent father figure. In 2006, she started a romance with a coworker nearly twice her age at Sydney Cosmetics. They moved in together, and her family approved. They traveled extensively, but eventually broke up a year after their engagement, with the age difference likely a factor. In 2010, Lisa graduated from the Sydney College of Stylists and landed a job as a hairdresser at a popular beauty salon, where she swiftly earned the respect of her colleagues and the trust of her clients. Around the same time, she started dating a new boyfriend, but their romance was short-lived after Lisa discovered he was married. Refusing to get involved in destroying someone else's family, she ended the relationship promptly. Before that, at a party, her boyfriend had introduced her to his friend, Simon Gitney, a businessman. This chance encounter would ultimately prove disastrous for Lisa. Born in December 1973 in Maryland, Simon Gitney came from a large, religious family of Lebanese immigrants. Raised alongside 5 siblings in a strict, obedient household, Simon struggled to control his emotions and anger from a young age. He was possessive, intolerant of rejection, and prone to violent outbursts, which eventually led to serious legal troubles. At 18, Simon Gitney was first incarcerated for harassing his ex-girlfriend at her workplace. The store owner intervened, but Simon returned with friends, assaulted the owner, and was subsequently arrested. Due to good behavior, he only served a few months before being released on bail. 3 years later, Simon was arrested again, this time for theft. He resisted arrest, engaged in a violent struggle, and bit off a policeman's earlobe. Although he faced a severe prison sentence, the pastor of the Lebanese Christian church, which his family belonged to, intervened on his behalf. As a result, Simon served only a year and a half in prison. In 2000, Simon was arrested for drugs. He served 2 years of a 4-year sentence. After his release, Simon transformed his life. He co-founded a luxury shoe business, invested in real estate and a premium car, and hid his criminal past from others. Simon and Lisa exchanged numbers at a party and started chatting. When Lisa complained about her living situation, Simon offered her a free room in his apartment while she looked for a new place. Despite her mom's concerns, Lisa moved in, thinking Simon might be gay due to his appearance and piercings. They lived separately for months, but grew closer over time, and a romance blossomed. Simon, 37, and Lisa, 28, were a couple. To Lisa, Simon seemed like a charming prince from a fairy tale. He was outgoing, cheerful, and lavished his love with gifts and surprises. They went everywhere together, including the elite sports club, which Simon had been attending for years. Lisa thought she had found her soulmate and would live happily ever after with him. She couldn't stop talking about him to her mom, brother, and friends, unaware that their fairy tale was about to come to an end. Simon's behavior changed 6 months in, but Lisa didn't notice. He distanced her from friends and family, erased her boundaries, and tried to control her views and tastes. He convinced her to quit her job at a beauty salon where she was happy by throwing a scene and forcing her resignation. A month and a half after that, the couple relocated to a luxurious 15th-floor apartment in an elite residential complex. Unbeknownst to Lisa, the apartment was heavily equipped with hidden surveillance cameras. Simon gifted Lisa an expensive smartphone and laptop, pre-installed with spyware that enabled him to monitor her messages, emails, and calls, as well as track her every move. He also gained access to her social media accounts, giving him the power to delete friends, posts, and photos at will. Katani's control over Lisa's life intensified daily, but he cleverly made it seem as though Lisa was voluntarily complying with his demands. He had invaded every aspect of her life, eliminating any semblance of privacy. Katani dictated Lisa's appearance, forbidding her from wearing makeup, claiming it made her look tacky, and instead bought her dull gray and black clothing, discarding her old outfits as too revealing. He restricted her movements, only allowing her to leave the apartment accompanied by him, and solely visiting places of his choice. He even banned her from going to the gym, instead purchasing expensive exercise machines, citing that she could now work out from home. Lisa's social media friend lists were shrinking daily, and Ghani finally convinced her to delete her accounts. With no friends left in real life, all her contacts and calls were closely monitored by Simon, who only allowed her to communicate with her mother and brother. During her last visit home in December 2010, Lisa decided to fly to Canada to spend Christmas with her family. Simon had planned to accompany her, but his urgent business matters prevented him from doing so. Despite initial reservations, he eventually agreed to let her travel alone, provided she adhered to his strict rules and conditions. When Lisa arrived, Jason and Joanna were astonished by the drastic changes they saw in her. She was a shadow of her former bright and cheerful self, now devoid of makeup, with her luxurious hair hidden under a headdress and dressed in unflattering all-black attire. However, it was the internal changes that were truly alarming. Lisa would flinch at every phone ring, instantly grabbing the receiver, as per Simon's instruction to answer calls immediately, regardless of the time or her activities. During her stay at her mother's house, Lisa refused to see friends and rarely ventured out. Joanna was shocked by her daughter Lisa's behavior and decided to talk to her. Lisa broke down, revealing that Simon controls her life, tracking her every move and restricting her freedom. He doesn't let her work, see friends, or pursue hobbies. Joanna was horrified, urging Lisa to stay in Canada, but Lisa insisted she loved Simon and believed he'd eventually calm down. Despite her family's pleas to stay, Lisa decided to move back to Australia to be with Simon. disregarding their warnings that the relationship was unhealthy. She reassured her mother that everything would be fine, saying Simon loved her and wouldn't harm her. However, after her return, the situation deteriorated significantly. Simon restricted her from leaving the apartment, and when they went out together, he demanded that she keep her eyes fixed on her feet, avoiding eye contact with other men. Moreover, he started calling her Cecilia, her second name, as he believed it was more respectable. In the spring of 2011, Lisa started complaining about pain in her leg, an old injury from her youth when she took ballet classes. Instead of taking her to the hospital, Ghani hired a female physical therapist to give Lisa massages 3 times a week at their home. The therapist soon became Lisa's closest friend and confidant, and Lisa openly shared her concerns about her difficult situation with her. On June 12th, Simon organized a birthday party for Lisa at the most expensive restaurant in Sydney, but the guest list only included his relatives and close friends. Lisa wasn't allowed to invite anyone she wanted, making it an isolating celebration. At the end of the evening, Simon proposed to Lisa by putting a ring on her finger. She accepted, but her tears were not of happiness. Instead, they were tears of desperation and hopelessness, noticeable to everyone present. Back home, Lisa called her mother and tearfully shared the news of her engagement. However, her mother, Joanna, was not pleased with the announcement. She tried to convince Lisa to end the relationship and return to Canada as soon as possible. Lisa asked her mother to avoid discussing this over the phone, as she had already realized that her fiancé, Simon, was eavesdropping on their conversations. Lisa attempted to focus on the upcoming wedding and started making plans. When she tried to discuss the details with Simon, he curtly dismissed her, informing her that he would select the venue, choose her dress, and create the guest list. Lisa felt utterly powerless, having no say in the matter. During a subsequent physiotherapy session, Lisa confessed that she couldn't continue like this, but felt trapped because Simon refused to let her go. The physiotherapist and Lisa devised a plan. At each session, Lisa would secretly pass some of her belongings to the therapist for safekeeping, all while ensuring Simon remained unaware of her actions. On July 28th, Simon rushed out of the house, leaving his laptop behind, which was unusual for him since he always carried it with him. Lisa seized the opportunity to investigate, and her worst suspicions were confirmed. She discovered a spyware program on the laptop, which Simon had used to obtain all her phone data and recordings of her conversations with her mother. Even more disturbingly, she found surveillance footage from the security cameras installed in every room of their apartment. On the same day, Lisa used her physical therapist's phone to call her mother and begged her to take the next available flight to come and rescue her from the apartment. However, Joanna couldn't drop everything immediately. She needed time to arrange a shift swap with a colleague. In hindsight, Joanna would always regret this delay. Back home, Simon quickly realized that his fiancée had discovered the spyware on his laptop. Lisa broke down in tears, trying to understand why Simon would do such a thing, but he justified his actions by claiming they were for her own good. On July 29th, an intense conversation took place between the young couple, a recording of which would later be presented in court. Lisa was overcome with emotion and asked to leave, but Simon remained calm and assured her that this would never happen, suggesting that she was suffering from mental health issues. On the morning of July 30th, 2011, Lisa woke up early, got dressed, and gathered her important documents and belongings in her purse. She locked herself in the bathroom and made a final phone call to her mother, warning her that if anything bad happened to her, it would be Simon's fault. It seemed Lisa was attempting to sneak out of the apartment while Simon slept, but unfortunately she was unsuccessful. What happened next is unclear, but according to neighbors, they heard a scream in the hallway. However, before they could react, the noise abruptly stopped, and exactly a minute later, a young woman fell to her death from the 15th floor balcony. Passers-by on the street also heard the scream and saw the body falling from a great height, but they didn't have time to understand what was happening. A man walking his dog that morning, who was closest to the scene, heard a noise and looked up. He saw a man holding something large, which he then threw down. When people arrived at the scene, they found a young woman lying on the ground, but despite their efforts, they couldn't help her. She died instantly, having suffered severe injuries. 3 minutes later, Ghani, still in his pajamas, ran out into the street, crying and saying he didn't know how he was going to live without his fiancée, claiming he hadn't caught her in time. At first, it seemed like an accident, but Ghani quickly claimed that his fiancée had intentionally ended her life. A note found in his pocket and a disturbing video suggested that something strange was going on. After the body was taken to the morgue and examined, a torn note was found in different pockets with the message, "There are cameras everywhere in the apartment." It's likely Lisa was afraid Simon would discover the note, so she ripped it into small pieces and scattered them among her pockets. An investigation revealed that indeed, multiple cameras were installed in the apartment, but the hard drive containing the recordings was nowhere to be found. Simon claimed that there were no video recordings at all. However, a surveillance camera in the communal hallway caught a disturbing scene. The short footage shows Lisa fleeing the apartment and calling for help, but Simon grabs her from behind, covers her mouth, and drags her back inside. This incident occurred just a minute before she fell off the balcony, and it was the scream that the neighbors heard. Ghani's laptop contained a recording of a conversation between Ghani and Lisa from the night before the tragedy, as well as spyware that Simon used to monitor his fiancée's activities. Simon claimed that he and Lisa had an argument that morning, during which she became hysterical and ran out into the hallway, screaming. He said he managed to bring her back inside because he didn't want to attract the attention of their neighbors. According to Simon, he then tried to call Lisa's mother, but she ran out to the balcony and jumped to her death just as he was doing so. Simon admitted that Lisa had previously threatened to take her own life, but he hadn't taken her warning seriously. Meanwhile, Ghani attributed the spyware on his laptop to Simon's supposed concern for Lisa's safety. During the trial, Simon was accompanied by Rachel Louise, a 22-year-old model who bore a striking resemblance to his late fiancé. However, it was later alleged that Rachel Louise was only using Simon to gain fame and attention, and that she willingly spoke to the press and appeared on TV to declare that Simon was incapable of harming a woman. Simon's lawyers attempted to persuade the court that Lisa was unstable, prone to outbursts, and potentially responsible for her own death, despite evidence of her long battle with anorexia and her treatment at a clinic. They also claimed that Simon, being shorter, would have been physically incapable of lifting Lisa, who was taller, or throwing her over the balcony. However, a gym trainer, who regularly saw Simon, testified that he was much stronger than he appeared and could easily have lifted Lisa, contradicting the defense's claims. This was further supported by the absence of Lisa's fingerprints on the railing and glass barrier, which suggested she could not have jumped without touching them. Additionally, the physiotherapist who had been confided in by Lisa and received her belongings in the hope of escaping her abusive relationship testified in court, providing crucial evidence. In the end, Ghani was found guilty of murdering his fiancée and sentenced to 26 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 years. After the verdict was announced, Rachel Louise became enraged and started insulting the judge, which led to her removal from the courtroom. Simon and his legal team attempted to appeal the court's decision, but all their efforts were unsuccessful, and the verdict stood. Following the verdict, Rachel ended her relationship with her boyfriend, citing in an interview that it was challenging to maintain a relationship while he was incarcerated, although she still believes he is innocent. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jasmine Richardson. In town, the Richardson family was renowned for being exemplary. Deborah and Mark, along with their children, 8-year-old Tyler and 12-year-old Jasmine, resided in a beautiful and cozy home. Like all Canadians, they were extremely hospitable and sociable. Their home frequently hosted guests, and the atmosphere was built on principles of love and respect. However, everything took a turn for the worse when their eldest daughter, Jasmine, entered puberty. The once calm girl underwent a drastic transformation. Firstly, her character changed. She became bold and frivolous. Conflicts between her and her parents began to arise, and her academic performance started to decline. Secondly, her preferences in music and clothing drastically changed. She shifted from enjoying modern pop to heavy rock. Bright colors and clothing were replaced by shades of gray and black, and her dressing style became provocative as she sought to appeal to boys, drawing attention to her curves. As a result, her interaction with former friends significantly decreased, and she began to spend more time alone in front of her computer screen. The door to her room was often closed, indicating a shift towards isolation. With the advent of the internet at home, she developed a fascination with Gothic themes, dark poetry, criminal psychology, and human anatomy. Miss Richardson even went so far as to identify as a witch, embracing the Wiccan religion. To explore these interests, she frequented various websites where she found a community of like-minded individuals who shared her passions. Her social media profile greeted visitors with the phrase, "Welcome to my tragic world." At first glance, it seemed like a typical teenage angst, marked by an excessive flair for drama and mysticism. However, she became increasingly withdrawn from her family. On her profile, she had listed a false name and claimed to be 15, as she preferred interacting with older individuals. Her parents attempted to be supportive during this challenging period, suggesting they spend quality time together and find common interests. However, she found these suggestions dull. Jasmine considered her younger brother a nuisance and gradually stopped communicating with him. Yet she could spend hours on end at the computer, conversing with strangers. Deborah and Mark recognized that their daughter's current state was a phase. She would mature and gain wisdom. As a result, they were quite permissive of her new interests. One day, Jasmine informed them that she wanted to attend a punk rock band concert. Her parents agreed, unaware of the consequences this outing would have. In early 2006, Jasmine Richardson went to a local youth band concert, following her own pursuits. She knew Jeremy Steinke, he who had been captivating her heart for months, would be there, as he was also drawn to Gothic culture. They had met on a vampire enthusiast's website where they occasionally exchanged messages. Jeremy presented himself as a 30-year-old werewolf craving blood, and to prove it, he wore a vial of blood around his neck, though it was unclear whether the fluid was human or animal in origin. Nonetheless, he clearly considered himself extraordinary, which Jasmine found extremely appealing. After meeting at a concert, the young people's affection for each other continued to grow. Eventually, Stinka worked up the courage to ask her out, and to his delight, she happily agreed. Everything seemed perfect, but there was a major obstacle. Jeremy was 23 years old. The couple was well aware that her parents would not approve of their relationship due to their significant age difference, so they decided to keep it a secret. Furthermore, Jeremy's troubled past would only make matters worse in her parents' eyes. Jeremy grew up in poverty, living with his mother and sister in a trailer. He had a troubled relationship with his mother, who drank excessively and had a string of volatile partners. These partners would often beat him when they were drunk. As a result, by the time he was 13, Jeremy was struggling in school and had developed a fragile mental state. Feeling overwhelmed, Jeremy once attempted to take his own life by hanging himself. Fortunately, he was stopped in time. Afterwards, doctors diagnosed him with depression and hyperactivity. At school, he was bullied, and eventually, he stopped attending classes altogether. As he got older, Jeremy became fascinated with the idea of being immortal and started visiting websites that focused on dark themes. His online profile was filled with topics like pain, self-harm, and bloody violence. Few people knew about Jeremy's secret relationship, except for his close friends, who found it unusual and disturbing. The couple managed to keep their communication private until the Richardsons started monitoring their daughter's excessive internet use. Deborah and Mark were alarmed when they discovered their daughter Jasmine had been chatting with strangers online, which is a concern for any parent. They immediately took away her computer to protect her. What they found out next was even more disturbing. Jasmine had become infatuated with an adult man who seemed to have questionable motives, known by the ominous nickname Soul Eater. This made her relationship with Jeremy officially off limits. Deborah and Mark sought the help of a psychologist to free their daughter from this harmful relationship. They believed that therapy would also improve their relationship with Jasmine. Fortunately, it worked, and Jasmine appeared to be getting back to a normal life, assuring them that the ordeal was behind her. As a sign of trust, they gave her computer back. Unfortunately, this decision would ultimately seal their fate. Saturday, April 22, 2006, Mrs. Richardson was preparing for bed when she heard a noise in the basement. At first, she thought it was just rats, but as she went downstairs and turned on the light, she saw a person wearing a ski mask standing opposite her, staring at her. Startled, Mrs. Richardson let out a loud scream. The stranger rushed towards her, trying to cover her mouth, but she struggled and screamed even louder. Frustrated, he stepped back, pulled out a knife, and stabbed her repeatedly in the chest. Hearing his wife's screams, Mark rushed downstairs, grabbing a screwdriver he had left on the floor earlier that day while fixing an outlet. When he entered the basement, he was met with a horrific scene. His wife lying in a pool of blood, with the attacker standing next to her. Mark immediately attacked the intruder, but was stabbed in the stomach. As the pain subsided and his eyes began to close, Mark quietly asked why. The attacker replied that it was because his daughter had wished it. Meanwhile, upstairs, Tyler was the only one left. He sat frozen on his bed in his pajamas, too scared to move. He heard the footsteps getting closer and closer until the bedroom door creaked open. Jasmine was thrilled that her parents believed she was remorseful, which allowed them to communicate again. She emailed Jeremy as soon as she got internet, telling him that it started with her parents gone and ended with them together. During therapy, a dark plan formed and solidified over time. Stinka found it tempting but insisted on creativity and attention to detail. The couple knew they couldn't be together while the Richardsons were alive. Later, Jasmine's friends remembered how frequently she talked about her parents, specifically how much she was annoyed by them. As a result, they believed she wanted to kill them. However, no one took Jasmine's words seriously. On Saturday, April 22, 2006, Garrett went to his friend Tyler's house across the street. He wanted to play, and the weather was nice despite being quite chilly, as it was still spring that year. When Garrett approached the house, he noticed the blinds were still closed, and no one answered his knock on the door. This was unusual, as the Richardsons' car was parked in the driveway. Hoping to see someone, the curious child peeked into the living room window but saw no one. Then, Garrett decided to walk around to the back of the house, where he often played with Tyler in the basement. Peeking through the window, he saw something strange and disturbing on the floor, what appeared to be two people lying in a pool of blood. He informed his mother, who was initially skeptical. However, she decided to investigate the family across the street. Together, they approached the house, and Garrett pointed out the window he had looked through earlier. The woman was horrified by what she saw and immediately called emergency services, reporting that something was amiss at the Richardsons, as they appeared to be lying on the basement floor, covered in blood. The police responded quickly, breaking down the front door and descending to the basement, where Garrett and his mother had witnessed the scene. Upon entering the dark basement, the officers struggled to identify the bodies on the ground, which were severely mutilated and bloodied. However, it soon became clear that it was Mark and Deborah Richardson, and they had tragically lost their lives. The area was covered in blood, with splatters on the floor, walls, and even the ceiling. A gruesome scene that defied description. Later, the police conducted a thorough search of the house and discovered a small child in the upstairs children's room. The child was lying in bed surrounded by toys, with visible knife wounds and a deeply cut throat. The scene was gruesome, with blood splattered everywhere. The incident was unprecedented in Medicine Hat, with one officer later stating that it would take decades to erase the memory of what they had seen that day. After searching the house, the police discovered that one family member was missing, Jasmine, the Richardsons' eldest daughter. Since the attack seemed to have happened in the basement and her room, while the rest of the house was untouched and nothing was stolen, officers feared for her safety. The state of the bodies suggested the crime occurred the night before, with the perpetrator breaking in and attacking Jasmine's parents. But what had become of Jasmine, and where was she now? The police developed various theories, hoping that by chance, the girl might be safe somewhere outside the home, or that the perpetrator had kidnapped her and was holding her captive. They also considered the possibility of a ransom demand from relatives in the future. However, as time went by, they found no clear answers. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that the Richardson family were truly wonderful people, faithful spouses and loving parents. They didn't deserve to have anyone wish death upon them. However, officers discovered that their eldest daughter had been causing trouble lately. This new information led to a shift in the tone of media announcements, and the investigation began to focus on locating a person of interest, 17-year-old Jasmine Richardson, who was referred to as JR in accordance with Canadian law, which protects the identities of minors. Jasmine and Jeremy Stank were identified as the wanted couple. Police questioned friends and acquaintances, thinking they might be hiding with them, but this lead was a dead end. However, it revealed that the pair attended a party just hours after the crime, where Jasmine seemed unaffected, drinking and making a disturbing joke about carving up her parents, which the guests laughed off as a dark humor. A comic strip found in Jasmine's school locker further confirmed her involvement in the crime, as it detailed how she would deal with her family members alongside her boyfriend as her accomplice. Photos of the suspects were widely circulated, and it was only a matter of time before someone came forward with information about their whereabouts. Soon, a tip arrived, and the couple was spotted in the community of Leader, Saskatchewan, about 130 kilometers from Medicine Hat. Caught off guard, Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Stank were found sleeping peacefully in a pickup truck and offered no resistance as they were taken to the police station. Jasmine was questioned first. She said she loved Stinka, and he felt the same, but their age and social differences were a problem. She claimed the Richardsons wouldn't have approved of their relationship. Jeremy, she said, killed her parents to be with her. When asked if she was involved, Jasmine denied it, saying she was out when it happened and only learned about it later. She accepted it because she loved Jeremy and ran away with him. Detectives struggled to crack the suspects, so they used a clever tactic. They planted an informant in Jeremy's cell who got him to spill details contradicting Jasmine's alibi. Jeremy confessed the murder plot was Jasmine's idea, and he only agreed after they took away her computer. He revealed he killed Deborah and Mark, while Jasmine killed her brother, and even begged him to kill Tyler too. After confessing, Miss Richardson was confronted with the recording and admitted to stabbing her brother out of mercy. She conceived the plan, confirmed by thousands of messages. Jasmine supported Jeremy's dark tastes, feeling alienated from society. Fearing loss, he helped realize the idea. He desired violent revenge, inspired by natural-born killers. With sufficient evidence, the suspects were charged with 3 counts of homicide. The detectives constructed a clear picture of the crime by piecing together the confessions of the accused, witness testimony, and other case evidence. Prior to the crime, Jeremy was intoxicated. Jasmine led him into the house and led him to the basement, where he attacked her mother, Deborah. Deborah was the first to die, suffering 12 stab wounds across her body, with the deepest wound piercing her chest and reaching 12 centimeters deep, ultimately striking her heart. Enraged, Jeremy continued his brutal assault on Mark, inflicting 24 wounds, 9 of which were in the back. Like his wife, the family patriarch bled out on the basement floor. Tyler Richardson, Jasmine's younger brother, was the last to die. While Jeremy was dealing with the parents downstairs, Jasmine inflicted 5 stab wounds on Tyler upstairs. After Jeremy finished with the parents, he went upstairs to assist his girlfriend with the child, callously slashing Tyler's throat as if carving a pumpkin. After washing off the blood at home, Jeremy met Jasmine at a predetermined restaurant where they discussed the night's events. From there, they attended a party. Casey Lancaster, a friend of Jeremy's, helped them eliminate evidence and escape to Saskatchewan. The atrocities they committed are almost indescribable. The couple embarked on their killing spree with an unnerving sense of calm, as if driven by some supernatural force. It's astonishing that, during interrogations and their time in custody, they showed no signs of remorse or regret for their actions. While in detention, they exchanged letters, referring to themselves as legends and immortals. In one letter, Jeremy proposed to Jasmine, who happily accepted. However, their crazed love suddenly began to deteriorate, much like last year's snow. During the trial, they abruptly shifted the blame onto each other. In June 2007, Jasmine Richardson became the first of the two to face trial. She entered a not guilty plea, arguing that she was in a trance-like state, unable to intervene while Jeremy killed her family members. Additionally, she claimed that she only inflicted injuries on her younger brother, and it was Jeremy who dealt the fatal blow. Jasmine maintained that her discussions with Jeremy about killing her parents were purely theoretical, but they resonated with him so strongly that he coerced her into turning them into reality. Despite being convicted of 3 counts of homicide, Jasmine Richardson received a 10-year prison sentence, thanks to Canada's juvenile criminal justice law, which stipulates that individuals under 14 cannot be imprisoned for more than 10 years. The sentence prioritized rehabilitating and restoring Jasmine's mental state over punishing her. In 2008, Jeremy Steinke's trial began. He claimed that he never initially intended to kill his girlfriend's parents. However, when discovered in the basement, he felt compelled to attack. Jeremy alleged that he did not harm Tyler, implying that Jasmine was responsible, while he merely observed from the doorway. The defense claimed that Jasmine had deliberately seduced Jeremy, hoping he would rescue her from her parents' strict control. Friends testified that Jeremy had confided in them about his plan, saying he was desperate to keep Jasmine and would do anything to prevent losing her. The lawyers also requested that the charges be downgraded to manslaughter, arguing that Jeremy was under the influence of drugs at the time of the incident. During questioning by the prosecution, Jeremy's inconsistencies were exposed when he was asked why he had committed the crime. He responded, "When you find your soulmate, you'll do whatever it takes for them." Throughout the trial, Jeremy remained unemotional, but he broke down in tears when his mother, Jacqueline May, took the stand in his defense. She acknowledged feeling guilty about her role in his upbringing, which had been marked by physical abuse, beatings, and rejection by her partners. Jeremy was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder and received 3 life sentences. He will not be eligible for parole until at least 25 years later, in 2033. The charge of being an accessory to the crime against Casey Lancaster was dropped in a Medicine Hat court. Casey Lancaster was found guilty of obstructing justice, sentenced to 1 year of house arrest, and ordered to abstain from drugs and alcohol. Jeremy Stank renamed himself Jackson May while in custody. Jasmine Richardson received a 10-year sentence, including 4 years in a psychiatric facility, where she was diagnosed with conduct and oppositional defiant disorders. Later, under community supervision, she showed genuine remorse. Released in 2016, Richardson now lives in Canada under an assumed name, sparking debate about her second chance. Hello, friends. welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sean Eckerd. Donna and Samuel Eckerd, who came from a long line of family relationships, tied the knot. Between them, they had 6 grown children from previous marriages. After facing numerous challenges in their early marriages, they found comfort and solace in each other. The couple decided to settle down in San Diego, California. They rented a spacious family home and never missed attending church services on weekends. A few years after their move, Donna gave birth to a son named Stanley, and 2 years later, Sean was born. Donna dedicated her life to raising her sons and taking care of the home. As a result, Stanley and Sean grew up in a loving and nurturing environment. They both attended a reputable local school, and every weekend, the entire family would participate in church activities without fail. The Eckerd family was a tight-knit one, with the adult children regularly keeping in touch and gathering together for family holidays, despite being scattered across the continent. Sean was a sociable and lively individual, boasting a charismatic personality that effortlessly drew people to him. He was an attentive listener and had a talent for empathy, making it easy for him to form friendships. In contrast, Stanley was more introverted and cautious around new people and experiences, which made socializing a bit more challenging for him. Despite their differing personalities and age gap, the brothers shared a common circle of friends and classmates. Unwaveringly loyal, they looked out for each other, often acting as one unit. As they grew up, they developed into well-mannered and academically successful young men. Their bond was built on trust and mutual respect, with their parents valuing respect above all else. Good-natured teasing between the brothers was commonplace, but always done in a light-hearted and humorous spirit. Donna and Samuel raised their children, instilling in them faith in God and guiding them according to God's laws. As the Eckerd brothers grew up, their lives unfolded naturally. However, their interests gradually diverged, becoming starkly different. Sean, the youngest, developed a passion for music and played in a band, while Stanley, the eldest, became fascinated with martial arts. Each brother's life was filled with vivid experiences and emotions, which they would share with the family in the evenings. Every evening, when the family gathered before dinner, Sean's stories about music, friends, and upcoming plans would dominate the conversation. The family would listen intently to Sean, leaving little time for Stanley to share his own experiences. Stanley felt that he didn't have grand plans or exciting stories to share, let alone friends to brag about. As a result, he humbly listened to his brother's stories, never getting the chance to share his own. On one memorable evening, Sean shared with his family that he had met a neighbor, Mary Jane, a delicate young girl with bright brown eyes and long blonde hair. He was captivated by her and had been drawn to her house by the enchanting piano melodies drifting from her open window. Entranced, he walked into her home without knocking, but his self-assurance and charm helped him to extricate himself from the awkward situation and make a good impression on the girl he was interested in. Although Mary Jane was a few years older than Sean, they were able to maintain a friendly relationship. Sean, being the social butterfly, would often organize picnics, inviting Mary Jane to join in. They spent their time strolling, visiting parks, and taking in the views from observation decks. However, their blossoming adolescent romance was cut short by the harsh realities of the adult world. The Eckerd family received devastating news about the illness of Donna's elderly mother, Sean and Stanley's great-grandmother. In pursuit of a better life, Sean's parents tried to consider the interests of each family member, but their decision ultimately changed the course of their lives. Sean was reluctant to leave his hometown, his friends, and Mary Jane, but the decision had already been made. The Eckards left the city where their children had grown up and moved to a new state. In 2005, they settled in Donna's mother's house in Spring Hill, Florida, starting a fresh chapter. For the whole family, this move felt like a breath of fresh air, as it proved to be the right decision. Sean and Stanley's grandmother was recovering well. Initially, The move was tough on Sean, who missed his band, strolls with Mary Jane, and hangouts in his favorite city. However, Sean's optimistic nature soon took over, and he began to build a new life as vibrant as the one he had left behind. Donna and Samuel found jobs at the Presbyterian Church, where they spent most of their time. Donna looked after the children in the nursery, while Samuel assisted with the chapel. Over time, the brothers reconciled and made new friends together. At their new school, they revived their old life. Sean rejoined the school band, while Stanley attended a martial arts school near their home. Despite their busy schedules, Sean remained obsessed with Mary Jane. Every night, he'd lock himself in his room and talk to her on the phone for hours. Their goodbyes always ended the same way, with Sean promising to visit her once he got his parents' permission. While Sean held on to his first love, the more reserved and modest Stanley struggled to find his place within the family. In an attempt to assert himself, Stanley made a series of poor decisions that would ultimately have devastating consequences for the entire family. In May 2006, Stanley told his parents he was quitting school to focus on martial arts and start a club. However, his extreme enthusiasm led him to associate with the wrong crowd, and he began committing petty fraud and trying illegal drugs. In 2007, his questionable connections landed him in trouble with the law, and he was arrested for stealing and charged with felony fraud. The news of Stanley's misbehavior hit his mother, Donna, hard. She had a heart attack and ended up in the hospital, but a lawyer hired by her sister-in-law helped resolve the situation. The lawyer successfully defended Stanley, highlighting the lack of concrete evidence, which led to a suspended sentence. This experience terrified Stanley, leaving him feeling guilty and withdrawn as he hoped to be understood and accepted by his family. After what happened to Stanley, Sean kept his plans private during the summer vacation. He worked as a waiter, saving money, and left a note for his mom saying he was heading to California to see Mary Jane. The 2-day bus ride seemed endless, with the scenery and time of day changing outside his window. He imagined seeing Mary Jane at the final stop, his heart full of anticipation. The bus pulled up to the final stop, and Sean couldn't wait to see Mary. Through the window, he'd caught a glimpse of her bright smile and her long hair, which she was tucking behind her ears. They shared a special connection, having spent some of the happiest days of their lives together, often reminiscing about their carefree high school days. It was during one of their strolls that Sean first confessed his love to Mary, and to his delight, she felt the same way. As they sat on a bench, Sean suddenly felt dizzy, his vision turned dark, and he lost consciousness. Sean was rushed to the hospital, where his condition rapidly deteriorated. Mary Jane quickly contacted Sean's sister, Jennifer, who flew from Florida to California to be by his side. The doctors diagnosed Sean with a tick-borne illness that can cause severe complications, including brain inflammation, in a matter of days. A long and arduous battle for Sean's life and health ensued. After over a month in a coma and 6 months of rehabilitation, the doctors finally managed to revive Sean. The road to recovery was tough, and the tick bite he'd suffered during their summer walk had turned out to be a serious injury. Jennifer took Sean back to Florida, where he began a long and difficult therapy. Mary Jane was left to wait anxiously, with phone calls being their only means of communication. The Eckhart family came together in the face of a series of troubles and unexpected illnesses. Donna went to great lengths to help her son Sean recover from a serious illness, carefully monitoring his diet and exercise to ensure he made a full recovery. Meanwhile, Stanley harbored feelings of resentment and jealousy towards his brother, which only grew as time passed. After his recovery, Sean regained his strength and resumed his studies in music. In 2009, he completed his studies and began making plans to return to Mary Jane, the girl he loved, and introduce her to his parents. However, his plans were not meant to be. Stanley introduced Sean to his dream girl, Samantha, a native of Florida, who quickly clicked with the two brothers. Samantha was charmed by Sean's cheerful and sociable nature, but Stanley was smitten with her and actively courted her. They went on several romantic dates, culminating in a passionate kiss. Stanley was over the moon, but Samantha had still been thinking about Sean. She sent him a message confessing her feelings and inviting him on a city walk. Sean agreed, and they spent the evening strolling along the waterfront, talking about Stanley and Mary Jane. However, Sean didn't try to win Samantha over, as he had already given his heart to someone else. Samantha, feeling down, sent a message to Stanley revealing that Sean had been seeing her behind his back and confessed his strong feelings for her. That same evening, Stanley was enraged. He stormed into his brother's room and they had a heated conversation. Initially, they spoke in hushed tones, but their words soon turned into loud shouts, followed by an eerie silence. Although their parents were home, they were accustomed to the brothers' loud arguments, so they didn't think much of it. It was Mom who first realized Sean was missing. He hadn't returned her calls. Recalling the argument from the previous evening, she got Stanley's explanation that Sean had left home after their fight. 2 days into the search, the police received a chilling call. The caller was Sean's sister, Jennifer. The dispatcher who took the call only heard a woman's scream and a loud, piercing male moan in the background. After repeated requests to calm down, the dispatcher finally managed to record Jennifer's desperate plea for help. Jennifer continued to scream, begging for assistance and reporting that Stanley had killed Sean. She said Stanley was in the house, talking to their mom, while their dad was in shock over his dead son, who had been buried in the backyard since early Saturday morning. The police officers arriving at the scene of the tragedy were met with a horrifying sight in the backyard of the house. Samuel was on his knees, his hands covered in dirt, as he frantically pulled his son's body out of the ground, screaming and desperately trying to clean the dirt off Sean's body. In an instant, a quiet neighborhood with well-manicured lawns, where the two young brothers would often wave to their neighbors, was transformed into a scene of violent tragedy. The once happy family, who had raised 2 sons, was now left with the traumatic memory of digging in the ground only to find one son's lifeless body and watching the other son being handcuffed and taken away. Stanley Eckert was arrested on suspicion of premeditated murder. During his initial interrogation, he claimed that he had not intended to kill his brother. According to Stanley, he struck Sean on the head in a fit of anger, causing the fatal injury. After realizing Sean was dead, Stanley tied up the body and secretly buried it in the backyard to avoid disturbing his mother. Stanley's statement at the inquest seemed callous and calculating, contrary to his claim of being a loving brother. He said, "I buried him after all, that's what you do with dead people." In his defense, Stanley maintained that he covered up the incident to spare his mother the shock of learning about her son's death. He planned to rebury the body once his parents were no longer around. Stanley's behavior during the interrogation was inconsistent. At times, he broke down in tears, confessed to the crime, and expressed remorse, portraying the incident as an accident. However, he also displayed hatred towards Sean, speaking harshly and bitterly about his brother, whom he blamed for his troubles and for winning their mother's and Samantha's affections. On the same day, Stanley was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, with no chance of bail. 2 days later, Dr. Barbara Wolfe performed an autopsy on Sean's body and presented her findings to the court. Her forensic examination revealed that Sean had bruising on his neck, both under the skin and in the form of rope marks, indicating that his neck had been constricted to make breathing difficult. The autopsy concluded that Sean's death was caused by a head injury and asphyxiation. Assistant State Attorney Pete Mago carefully reviewed the case. The first hearing took place on February 25, 2011, presided over by District Judge Stephen Rushing. Stanley's parents, Donna and Samuel Eckert, sat in the second row, weeping as they watched their oldest son being led into the courtroom in handcuffs. On April 9, 2013, the trial of Stanley Eckert began in Hernando Court, presided over by District Judge Anthony Taddy. The defense team, led by attorney Alan Hunter, faced prosecutor Pete in the prosecution, The prosecution's main objective was to convince the jury that Stanley had carefully planned the crime, whereas the defense argued that the tragedy resulted from a spontaneous fight. In his closing statement, Alan Hunter appealed to the jury to consider Stanley's attempt to cover up the crime, allegedly driven by good intentions. Stanley Eckard was charged with first-degree premeditated murder, which carried a mandatory life sentence if convicted. The verdict would determine his fate, with sentencing scheduled for May 13th. Alternatively, if convicted of second-degree murder, Stanley faced up to life in prison. Throughout the trial, Stanley maintained that he never intended to kill his brother 3 years prior, before burying him in the front yard of their house. Prior to the trial, Eckard had rejected a plea deal from prosecutors, which offered to limit his prison sentence to 20 years in exchange for pleading guilty to second-degree murder. As the clerk read the verdict, Stanley remained stone-faced, his fate now in the hands of District Judge Anthony Taddy, who had presided over the 5-day trial. Samuel and Donna, the parents of the accused, wept quietly as the jury left the courtroom. Samuel's sobs soon turned to screams as numerous relatives gathered around him and his wife, Donna. The jury had found Eckard guilty of second-degree murder, but didn't completely absolve him of guilt, as they believed that he didn't plan to kill 19-year-old Sean. The jury, consisting of 9 women and 3 men, reached this verdict after deliberating for approximately 2.5 hours. The Eckard family maintained that they believed Stanley's account of the events that unfolded in the early morning hours of June 19, 2010. They also criticized the state attorney's office for filing charges against Eckard. Later that day, Samuel Eckard praised Chief Assistant Public Defender Alan Lanter for doing an excellent job. The family, however, questioned the appropriateness of the sentence and subsequently filed an appeal to overturn the verdict, which was denied. Samuel Eckard expressed his surprise at the jury's verdict, stating that he couldn't understand how the jury reached a verdict of second-degree murder in about 2 hours. He added that despite that, their faith was not shaken. One undisputed fact that emerged during the trial was that after his brother's death, Stanley pulled his body out of Sean's bedroom window and buried it in a shallow grave in the backyard of the family's Spring Hill home. It was Samuel Eckard who discovered Sean's body 2 days later. Pete Mago showed the jury photos of Sean's body in a hole, highlighting the gruesome reality. He emphasized Stanley's inconsistent testimony, changing his story 6 times when questioned about his brother's death. Mago revealed Stanley sent fake messages from Sean's phone, pretending he was alive. After hours of questioning, Stanley finally admitted to killing Sean during a struggle, claiming he hid the body to protect their mother. Mago argued Stanley's manual infliction of injuries constitutes murder, citing testimony and statements about escalating tensions with Samantha Rowe. Stanley discussed revenge with his brother and friend, mentioning a method of killing, but this evidence was tenuous. Alan Lanter argued a crime requires intent, denied killing his brother, and cited the pathologist's testimony that Sean's death was likely caused by a combination of factors, including a head injury possibly sustained from a fall. Lanter reminded the jury of Donna Eckard's testimony about Sean's severe mood swings after his illness diagnosis. She also said his death was an accident. Lanter urged jurors to focus on the circumstances leading to Sean's death, not the disturbing photos or Stanley's decision to bury him. Stanley Eckard is not a murderer, Lanter said. The Eero parents were devastated, having lost 2 sons in 1 day. The brutal murder of an innocent brother is beyond comprehension. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with between families were mostly limited to religious gatherings and celebrations. Michael and his wife built a peaceful home life, raising their kids in faith and discipline. When their eldest sons left for university, the 3 younger kids continued homeschooling, pleasing their parents. Neighbors and friends praised the kind, responsive, and interesting kids, Kara, Caitlin, and Daniel. Kara, the eldest daughter, challenged traditional values in her teens. Despite her dad's disapproval, she joined the soccer team, snuck out to discos, and did forbidden things. Her dad was troubled, and talks often ended in arguments and her running away. Kara sought romantic relationships and showed interest in boys. In 2005, David, 18, and Kara, 14, connected at a homeschooling support group. They formed a close bond, hiding it from their parents, and used social media to exchange messages, pouring their hearts out. They crafted coded messages to keep their communication private. Kara and David's letter exchange wasn't enough, so they secretly met in person. At first, they took innocent walks, but their friendship blossomed into romance. They snuck out to discos, spending nights together. David, older, had experienced first love, while Kara's inexperience made her feelings overwhelming. Her joy was radiant, but her obedience to her parents was feigned, driven by fear of discovery. But sooner or later, every secret is exposed. One day, Kara couldn't keep her secret hidden anymore and confided in her sister. She showed her a photo of David, told her about how they met and how they were deeply in love and willing to overcome all obstacles to be together. They were even planning to run away to be together. However, Kara's sister was worried about her and told their mother about their planned elopement, which ultimately revealed the secret of the young lovers. One early morning, Kara snuck back home, feeling elated after her date with David. But her mother was waiting in her room, clearly aware of her secret. At breakfast, Kara's parents forbade her from seeing David, deeming him unsuitable due to their concerns about violence and drugs. Angry and disappointed, Kara's father grounded her. That night, Kara spent her free time at David's house. At 5:30 a.m., David drove Kara back to her neighborhood and dropped her off near her house. They agreed that once Kara was safely back in her room, she would send him a text message to let him know she was okay. However, the message never came. David tried calling her home phone several times and sent her a few messages on social media, but he didn't hear back from her. An hour later, Kara finally got in touch with him, explaining that she had gotten caught by her parents and asked him to come over so they could talk to him. David arrived on time, but Kara's parents were fiercely opposed. Her dad forbade David from seeing Kara, deeming her too young for a relationship. David's declarations of love fell flat, with her dad threatening to call the police if he saw them together again. The emotional confrontation ended with Kara grounded and David leaving, feeling rejected and heartbroken for the first time. The lovers' separation was agonizing. They devised a plan to deceive everyone by pretending to break up while secretly continuing their affair. In public, they convincingly played the part of former lovers, not even greeting each other. Kara's parents were convinced they'd protected her from a youthful mistake. However, David missed Kara terribly, often reading Shakespeare and imagining openly serenading her like Romeo. David Ludwig took drastic measures by calling Kara's home to request a meeting with her father, Michael. On November 13, 2015, the young man arrived at the Borden residence, determined to discuss their plans to get married. Ludwig confessed his love for Kara and their intentions to Michael, but he received a dismissive response, saying it would never happen. Prepared for this reaction, Ludwig, fueled by anger, pulled out a handgun and shot Michael in the back as he walked towards the front door. Next, he targeted Kara's mother, Catherine, shooting her while she sat in a chair. Ludwig then searched the house for Kara, calling out her name, but she was nowhere to be found. He got into his car, started the engine, and began to drive away. That's when he spotted Kara running down the road towards him. She got into the car, expressing her desire to escape and start a new life with David. They fled the city in David's red car, leaving the chaos behind. Kara Borden was missing for 24 hours after her parents, Michael and Catherine Borden, were found dead. Investigators reviewed surveillance footage, which led them to track the teenagers. The footage also showed that Kara didn't resist and had willingly gone with David Ludwig. As a result, the charges against Ludwig for abducting Kara were dropped. Alerts were issued to police across the East, including in Pennsylvania and Indiana, as the couple was spotted heading west in a red Volkswagen Jetta. On Monday morning, authorities received a tip about a vehicle matching the description parked near a truck stop outside Fort Wayne. Police rushed to the area, but the car was already gone. State police were alerted, and they spotted the car around noon on Interstate 70 in Belleville. David Ludwig got onto the interstate, leading police on a high-speed chase at 90 to 95 miles per hour on a two-lane highway. According to State Trooper David Couch, who was involved in the pursuit, Ludwig drove extremely recklessly and dangerously, causing multiple accidents, much like in an action movie. The district attorney announced that, despite the initial kidnapping charge being dropped, they would still face charges for the brutal murder of Michael and Catherine Borden. David Ludwig and Cara Beth Borden went on the run following the tragic incident, evading authorities for approximately 28 hours before being apprehended in Indiana. While Cara Beth was not charged with any crime, David Ludwig was detained without bail, facing charges of murder and abduction. In the aftermath, Cara was taken in by relatives and church members for care. David Ludwig was arrested on November 14, 2005, following a high-speed chase that ended with his vehicle crashing into a tree. He was charged with the murder of the Bordens, a crime allegedly committed after a prolonged dispute. Ludwig confessed to 2 counts of intentional harm, stating that he had deliberately intended to shoot the Bordens if they got in his way, and that he did so. During a search of his vehicle after his arrest, no weapons were found. However, when the police searched his home, they discovered an arsenal of 54 firearms, which belonged to his father, a hunter who had taught Ludwig how to handle weapons. The police also found an 18-minute video on a laptop in his home, which showed Ludwig discussing plans to invade another family's home, armed with weapons. The plan was abandoned due to the presence of too many cars. Although the police declared Cara Borden a victim in the case, Ludwig claimed that surveillance footage from various stores along their route would prove that she was not abducted. He did not resist extradition to Pennsylvania, and a judge ordered him held without bail. Ludwig was not represented by an attorney during the charge presentation, and a preliminary hearing was set for November 23rd. The trial of Ludwig, who was responsible for the deaths of 2 adults in front of their children, was brief, as detailed in court documents. Caitlin, Cara's 13-year-old sister, told investigators that her parents were killed after arguing with David Ludwig for about an hour. According to Caitlin, Ludwig shot her father, and she then ran to the bathroom where she heard a second shot, which likely killed her mother. Afterwards, Ludwig ran through the house, calling out to Cara. In June 2006, David Ludwig agreed to a plea deal with District Attorney Donald R. Totaro, who had originally sought the death penalty. As a result, Ludwig pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder, among other charges, and was immediately sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences of 9.5 to 19 years. He was also ordered to pay $125,000 in restitution. Since 2006, Cara Borden has been under guardianship, represented by legal counsel. In November 2005, it was reported that the charge of abduction against David G. Ludwig was dropped. The court concluded that Cara had voluntarily left with Ludwig, as supported by written statements. Ludwig's lawyer claimed that Cara had accompanied David voluntarily during their journey through 3 states, and surveillance footage showed that she had multiple opportunities to escape. Cara herself admitted that she had run after Ludwig as he left her house. Cara Beth Borden was identified as a victim in this tragic situation, and as a result, the Lancaster County District Attorney did not file criminal charges against her. This decision was influenced by her actions during the investigation and the digital evidence collected from emails, blogs, and texts exchanged with Ludwig. A memorial service was held at Lancaster Bible College, where Cara Beth, surrounded by her siblings, mourned the loss of her parents. As a sign of respect and remembrance, the neighborhood adorned their mailboxes with white ribbons. This tragedy left 5 children without the guidance and love of their parents. David Ludwig, was transferred to Indiana's State Correctional Institution at Pine Grove to serve his life sentence for murdering his girlfriend's parents. He was chosen for the prison's youthful offender program, designed for inmates 15 to 20, which focuses on teaching self-responsibility, discipline, and respect for others. David Ludwig, now 37, is serving 2 life sentences for fatally shooting Michael and Catherine Borden in 2005 after they barred him from seeing their 14-year-old daughter. He cited the 2012 U.S. Supreme Court ruling against life imprisonment for minors, but the PA Supreme Court denied his petition, agreeing with a lower court that he's not entitled to same consideration since he was 18 at the time. David Ludwig will spend life in prison. The community struggled to understand how well-raised kids committed evil. Despite Christian homeschooling, tragedy struck, leaving questions if parents overlooked or failed to convey values. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sydney Loof. Sydney Irene Loof was born on August 21, 1993 in Broken Bow, Nebraska, to George and Russo Loof. She spent her childhood in Arcadia with her parents until 2000, when the family moved to Ney, where her mother worked as a special education teacher and her father was the school principal. Growing up, Sydney was an energetic and outdoor-oriented girl who loved nature. Her father, George, often took her fishing during her school years. She was also involved in sports, playing basketball and golf, where she showed promise. However, she developed scoliosis, which forced her to give up many of her favorite activities and ended her sports career. After graduating from high school in 2011, Sydney found employment at a local Menards store that specialized in home improvement products. Despite moving from Norfolk to Lincoln for work, Sydney remained close to her family, who made an effort to stay in touch almost daily and regularly met for dinner. Although she lived independently, Sydney frequently returned to her parents' house. Sydney had been battling depression, feeling that the medications she was on were actually making her condition worse. Her mom, Susie, was deeply concerned and urged her to see a new doctor, who prescribed different medications. During phone calls with her mom, Sydney's voice sounded increasingly optimistic as she reported that her mental state was improving. She was attempting to make positive changes in her life, including searching for a new job, as working in a store didn't fulfill her ambitions. However, she was still uncertain about her career goals, which contributed to her feelings of depression. By November 2017, Sydney's mental health had taken a turn for the worse, leading her to take antidepressants and occasionally smoke marijuana. Despite her family and friends offering support, she yearned for romance and love. As a young modern woman with an interest in the same gender, Sydney sometimes turned to social media to find potential dates. To expand her social circle and find a friend, she used Tinder, a popular dating app. In November 2017, Sydney met a man named Aubrey online, and they started exchanging messages. They quickly discovered they had a lot in common, including a love for gambling, hiking, and good food. After just 100 messages, they decided to meet in person on November 14th. Sydney visited Aubrey at his home in Wilbur, and their first meeting went really well. They hit it off and agreed to meet again the following day at Aubrey's house. Before their second meeting, Sydney worked her shift at the store, went home, and got ready. She even took a photo of herself and posted it on Tinder with the caption, "Ready for my date." When Aubrey arrived, they drove off together. The next day, however, Sydney failed to show up for work, which was unusual for the normally reliable Sydney. Despite her high spirits in the days leading up to her disappearance, her family was worried when her coworkers informed them that she hadn't shown up. Sydney's mother, Susie, revealed that her daughter had been struggling with anxiety and depression in the days leading up to her disappearance. Sydney had discussed her deteriorating mental health with her family, who advised her to see a doctor again to take antidepressants. That was the last time Sydney's family saw her. When Sydney's parents went to her apartment, They were extremely surprised to find that she had left her favorite cat, Mimsy, without food or water. This was extremely unlike the caring pet owner they knew Sydney to be. Concerned, they reported Sydney missing to the police. During a welfare check of Sydney's home, the police found the apartment locked and saw nothing out of the ordinary. However, the family remained adamant that something was wrong, and the police took their concerns seriously. On November 16, 2017, Sydney Loof was reported missing after failing to arrive at her workplace, the Menards store showroom on 27th Street in Cornhusker Highway. Sydney had a spinal condition that affected her gait, making her stand out in a crowd. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing a white Columbia brand jacket and a cream-colored shirt. According to her parents, Sydney told her friend on Snapchat on Wednesday morning that she had gone on a date with a man she met online the previous night and planned to meet up with her again that evening. Her car was found in Northeast Lincoln, and police conducted interviews, searching for any leads that could help locate Sydney. A massive search effort was launched to find Sydney, featuring highway billboards with her photo and a televised manhunt. Susie remained adamant that something had happened to her daughter after her date. To support her claim, she shared a screenshot of a Snapchat post by Sydney, captioned, "Ready for my date." Sydney's friends confirmed that she was planning to meet a woman named Aubrey, whom she met on Tinder. During the investigation, police examined Sydney's phone records and surveillance footage from her workplace, which led them to identify a key person of interest. They traced Sydney's last phone signal to a cell tower in the Wilbur neighborhood, likely close to Aubrey's residence, although they had no information about Aubrey's identity at the time. Authorities started looking for a man named Aubrey, who was the last person to see Sydney before she went missing. The problem was that no one knew Aubrey's real identity or if he even existed. Sydney's friend Brooklyn took matters into her own hands and decided to track down Aubrey using Tinder. She downloaded the app, found Aubrey's profile, and exchanged phone numbers with him. This allowed the police to finally learn Aubrey's real name, which was Bailey Boswell, a 26-year-old woman. Further investigation revealed that Bailey lived in an apartment near the cell tower where Sydney's phone was last connected. Bailey shared this apartment with her partner, 52-year-old Aubrey Trail. Bailey Boswell, from a normal and wholesome family in Lyons, Iowa, grew up as a friendly and successful student who excelled in basketball and running. However, following her father's death, her life took a downward turn. She started keeping bad company and got involved with alcohol and illicit drugs. On a dating website, Bailey met Aubrey Trail, a man with a history of fraud, issuing fraudulent checks and theft. Aubrey had created a cult where he referred to himself as the Vampire Daddy and paid women $200 weekly to follow his unusual rules. At the time of Sydney's disappearance, Aubrey and Bailey faced a court order to pay over $40,000 in fraud reparations and had multiple misdemeanors against them. On November 19, 2017, they went into hiding. When police searched their apartment, they found that some walls had been scrubbed with bleach, which a neighbor confirmed. After a few days, the police located Aubrey and Bailey at a hotel in Branson, Missouri, and took them into custody a few weeks after Sydney's disappearance was reported. A thorough examination of phone records and Bailey's location data led the police to the gruesome discovery of Sydney's remains. Her body had been dismembered, with 13 parts found in black plastic bags in ditches in Clay County. Tragically, some of her organs, including her heart, were missing. Bailey and Aubrey were charged with first-degree murder, improperly disposing of human remains, and conspiracy to commit a felony. Bailey pleaded not guilty to all three charges. Aubrey, on the other hand, pleaded not guilty to felony murder and conspiracy, but guilty to improperly disposing of human remains. However, Aubrey's various statements were inconsistent, and he often appeared confused, changing his account of events and introducing new characters. He made bizarre claims, including that he was a vampire who could fly, and spoke about witchcraft. Aubrey claimed to be a cult leader and vampire, telling authorities he had witches in the cult who needed to kill another woman to gain powers. In one of his early court hearings, Aubrey admitted to killing Sidney Loof, but said it was an accident. He claimed to have paid Sidney $5,000 to participate in a threesome with 2 other women, which Sidney had agreed to. However, during the act, he strangled her with a cord by mistake. Aubrey also confessed to cutting Sidney's body into pieces, a ritual according to his beliefs, to release her soul to the gods in a sacred place. He believed this would help her reincarnate faster. However, the prosecution presented evidence contradicting Aubrey's story. Surveillance footage from November 14th showed Aubrey and Bailey checking into a Lincoln hotel near Sidney's home. The following day, they visited a home improvement store, buying a hacksaw, bleach, a folding saw, a stationary knife, and the bags used to store Sidney's remains. Furthermore, a surveillance camera caught Sidney encountering Aubrey at the Menards store on November 15th, unaware of the danger she was in. On June 11, 2018, the first court hearing took place regarding the murder and improper burial of Sidney Loof. Although separate trials were ordered for Bailey and Aubrey, the charges against them were essentially the same. The trials were held in Lexington because the defense attorneys successfully argued that a fair trial would be impossible in Wilbur due to the extensive publicity surrounding the case. The prosecution's case rested on the argument that Sidney's death was a premeditated murder, as evidenced by the fact that she was strangled and that the crime was carefully planned and executed. The jury listened to 3 other women who had previously dated Aubrey and Bailey, all of whom they met through Tinder. Each of these women had been intimate with Bailey and had also been involved with Aubrey. One of them shared that she had even gone on a trip with them after they met, during which Aubrey gave her $200 a week and invited her to join his group, which he called Witches, telling her that she would have to torture and kill someone to become a member. Another woman testified that Bailey had discussed breaking her fingers and dissecting a body in detail, revealing her fascination with torture. The prosecution pieced together the events of the fateful evening of November 15, 2017. Sidney had arranged to meet a woman she had known for a couple of days, with whom she had been chatting on Tinder. Bailey picked Sidney up from her apartment, and they drove around in his car. The car eventually stopped at Bailey's house, where Sidney was coaxed into the apartment. Once inside, Bailey and Aubrey attacked her, strangling her with an extension cord on the living room floor. Afterwards, Bailey and Aubrey meticulously cleaned the apartment, which the prosecution argued was a premeditated act. The next day, November 16th, they dismembered Sidney's body and dumped her remains in Clay County. The court heard testimony from Jennifer, the landlord, who stated on November 16th, she drove into the garage and immediately noticed a strong chlorine smell that intensified when she entered the house. The medical examiner testified that Sidney's death was ruled a homicide by asphyxiation. Toxicology reports showed that Sidney had antidepressants in her system at the time of death. In addition to the missing organs, the upper left arm, from just above the elbow to below the shoulder, was also found to be missing from Sidney's body. The prosecutors sought the death penalty for both defendants, and if the sentence was deemed unjust, the case would be retried. However, Aubrey denied any involvement in the occult and pleaded guilty only to improperly burying Sidney's remains. During his trial, Aubrey shouted that Bailey had no involvement in Sidney's death, claiming Bailey's innocence. In a dramatic turn, Aubrey then slashed his throat 3 times with a razor blade but survived and was detained until he made a full recovery. Aubrey testified he lied about Sidney Loof's death, admitting he met her in 2017 and paid her for illegal activities. He claimed Sidney died accidentally during an intimate act with an extension cord in November 2017. Aubrey confessed to dismembering and dumping her body, but maintained it was an accident, and he didn't seek help because he thought no one would believe him. Aubrey confessed to getting rid of Sidney's body, claiming it was an accident from an extension cord during intimate act. Bailey denied involvement, with her lawyers saying she was also a victim of Aubrey's manipulation. However, phone records and location data proved Bailey's involvement, tracking her near where Sydney's body parts were found. The court learned that Bailey initiated contact with Sydney and arranged a meeting. Bailey drove to Sydney's duplex on the evening of November 15th to pick her up. The prosecution claimed that Bailey took pleasure in discussing cruel acts and enjoyed talking about torture with Aubrey. Evidence presented in court revealed a planned crime on the day Sydney was killed. Bailey and Aubrey went to Home Depot around noon that day, where they bought tools, including a hacksaw, scissors, and a box cutter, as part of their plan. Bailey sent Sydney a text message inquiring about her day, and phone records and surveillance footage show that she sent the message from the Menards parking lot, where Aubrey was also present. Sydney, who worked at Menards, seemed unaware of Bailey's presence. A few hours later, Bailey sent Sydney another message on Tinder, stating that she was at Sydney's apartment and would pick her up soon. However, phone records indicate that instead of going on a date as Sydney believed, Bailey and Aubrey went to the apartment where they lived. Bailey's attorney, Todd Lancaster, argued that the evidence only showed that Bailey was guilty of aiding and abetting the improper disposal of Sydney's body by buying bleach in garbage bags. On November 8, 2021, Bailey Boswell received a life sentence. The Loof family had waited 3 long years, grieving and yearning for their Sydney, anticipating a verdict that would bring them solace. Prior to this, on July 11, 2019, a jury took less than 3 hours to convict Aubrey Trail of premeditated conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and improper burial of human remains. A 3-judge panel described his crime as cold and calculated. In the trial's second phase, determining whether he should face execution, county prosecutors secured the death penalty for Aubrey Trail, fulfilling their promise. Consequently, on June 9, 2021, Aubrey Trail was put to death by lethal injection. Aubrey Trail, the con artist accused of brutally murdering Nebraska woman Sydney Loof, allegedly deceived his cult followers by claiming to be a flying mind-reading vampire with a coven of 12 witches. He claimed these witches gained their powers by killing people. Fortunately, in this real-life story, justice prevailed, and through the trial, the monster faced the end of his trail. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Vicki Roberts. Vicki Roberts was born in September 1984 in northwest England, where she was raised in a traditional and devoutly religious family. She was the younger of 2 daughters and was raised with strong Christian values. She attended a Christian school, where she also developed her musical talents and sang in the choir. Those who knew Vicki described her as a kind, friendly, and helpful person who was always willing to lend a hand. After completing high school, Vicki enrolled in university and took a part-time job at an IKEA store to support herself. It was there that she met Michael Roberts, and their initial friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. Michael was only a year older than her. Like Vicki, Michael balanced his studies with a part-time job at IKEA and made time for sports. He was also careful about his appearance and made a good impression on those around him. Vicki was initially put off by Michael's bold and outgoing personality, but she soon found herself developing strong romantic feelings for him. Michael was born in June 1983 in Warrington, Cheshire, to a family of modest means. His father was a successful chemical engineer who expected a lot from his 2 sons, particularly Michael, the eldest. As a result, Michael grew up with high ambitions and a strong sense of purpose. He was a diligent student and developed into a driven and accomplished individual. Michael was a social butterfly with many friends and was often the life of the party. However, he took the most pride on the love front. With his good looks, sense of humor, and charming personality, Michael was a catch. He was also intelligent and well-read, able to hold his own in conversations on a wide range of topics. Michael's parents had instilled in him the idea that he was exceptional, praising his intelligence, beauty, and potential for success. However, this upbringing may have also fostered narcissistic tendencies. Despite this, Michael felt a deep-seated need to live up to his parents' expectations and be the perfect son, driving him to strive for their approval. Michael had a series of brief relationships and frequently dated multiple people simultaneously. He was confident in his charm and enjoyed the thrill of pursuing women who seemed out of his reach. For Michael, this was a game, a challenge to be won. Vicky is one of the challenges he wants to conquer. She was a modest and unattainable woman who initially kept Michael at arm's length, refusing even casual invitations. Vicky was focused on her studies and spent her free time at church, leaving little room for dating or relationships. Michael, however, was determined to win her over. It took Michael a few months to win Vicky over, but eventually she agreed to go out with him. He had charmed her with his sweet gestures, flowers, gifts, and thoughtful surprises. He even invited her to meet his parents, who immediately took a liking to her and approved of their son's choice. Vicky was convinced that Michael was genuinely interested in her, so she gave in to his advances. He became her first serious partner, and she felt truly happy when she was with him. It seemed like fate had brought them together. Michael also appeared to be in love and ready to settle down, but their happiness was short-lived. From the outside, their relationship seemed perfect. They were both young, attractive, and full of energy and ambition, with big plans for the future. Vicky soon discovered that Michael had a strong and adventurous approach to sex, with a high sex drive and a desire to try new things in the bedroom. At first, Michael didn't pressure Vicky to engage in certain activities, fearing she would leave him. However, once he felt secure in their relationship, he revealed his true desires. Vicky, a modest and religious person, was shocked but deeply in love with Michael and trusted him, keeping their private life a secret. Things took a turn when Michael proposed to Vicky, and she happily accepted, believing that marriage would bring an end to his experimental behavior. However, her closest friend began to notice Vicky covering up bruises and marks under her clothes. When confronted by her friend, Vicky initially denied any wrongdoing by Michael but eventually confessed that the marks were a result of Michael's affinity for bondage, toys, and other devices during their intimate moments. Vicky confided in her friend that she and Michael had intimate relations up to 5 times a week. Michael considered himself a skilled lover, viewing intimacy as an art form and a means of self-expression. Although he would occasionally compromise when Vicky refused to participate in his more extreme and reckless experiments, he usually managed to persuade her to give in to his desires. After graduating, Vicky became pregnant unexpectedly and decided to change careers. She soon landed a job as an account manager at a logistics company. Michael also left his job at IKEA and became a sales consultant at a large electronics retailer, selling phones, laptops, and other gadgets. Thanks to his charisma and persuasive abilities, he consistently exceeded his sales targets and quickly became one of the top-performing employees. Michael's success led to a promotion to senior sales, and he was being considered for a transfer to the company's main office. However, he needed to undergo additional training to improve his qualifications first. Michael enjoyed the training sessions and business trips to London, and he took great pride in his accomplishments. As a result, he often forgot about Vicky, his young fiancée, and only remembered her when he wanted intimacy. Vicky and Michael's relationship was lacking in several ways. They rarely spoke about each other or spent time together outside of the bedroom, making Vicky feel invisible to him. Meanwhile, Michael was secretly having affairs with coworkers, clients, and casual acquaintances. During this time, Vicky discovered she was pregnant and shared the news with Michael, expecting him to be thrilled and expedite their wedding plans. Instead, he was furious and insisted that she terminate the pregnancy, citing their youth and the fact that they had their whole lives ahead of them. Vicky was shocked and refused to consider abortion. Michael then attempted to persuade Vicky by appealing to her concerns about her family. He claimed that her parents, who were deeply religious, would be angry and disappointed in her for becoming pregnant out of wedlock. However, Michael promised that if Vicky agreed to have an abortion, they could keep and plan to have children after they were married. Vicky was faced with a tough decision, but Michael's persistence eventually won her over, and she went to the hospital. Unfortunately, the experience was complicated, and Vicky had to stay in the hospital for a few days. It took her nearly 3 weeks to recover. During this time, her doctor strictly advised her against intimate relationships. When Michael found out, he became furious. It was then that Vicky realized Michael had mental health issues and an addiction to sex. Without intimacy, he became unbearable, frequently leaving the house, citing urgent work matters. Vicky suspects Michael is having an affair, and she hoped that getting married would help him change his ways and be more committed to their relationship. As it turned out, their relationship was loveless, and Michael was leading a double life. Their 2-year engagement was just a convenient arrangement for him, as he had a loyal partner waiting for him at home, taking care of the household, while he maintained a string of mistresses on the side, which he frequently replaced. Vicky always trusted Michael and forgave him whenever he cheated, as long as he promised it wouldn't happen again. However, as time passed, Vicky began to pressure Michael into getting married, as she wanted to start a family and have children. Her parents also brought up the topic frequently, but what really pushed Michael to consider marriage was the insistence of his own parents, whom he didn't want to disappoint. Michael's parents adored Vicky, thinking she was perfect for their son. They constantly asked him they would tie the knot and give them grandchildren. With the help of his parents, Michael and Vicky organized a grand wedding, complete with a white dress, limousine, and a beautiful ceremony. The newlyweds appeared to be in love and happy, with a long life ahead of them. After the wedding, they settled into a large, cozy house in a prestigious area of Warrington, close to Michael's parents. Despite their marriage, Michael didn't truly love Vicky. It was more of a way to appear normal to others. Vicky never expressed her concerns about Michael's unusual behavior and frequent infidelity, allowing him to freely change partners. Meanwhile, Michael's career was thriving. He received a promotion and a significant salary increase after being transferred to a new office. His direct supervisor was Carrie Hall, the head of administration at Phones for You. Carrie was a decade older than Michael, divorced, and raising her son independently. Despite her tough exterior, she was attractive, well put together, and strong-willed, as her position demanded. For a while, she ignored Michael's subtle advances, but to him, her indifference was a signal to take action. Michael set out to win over Carrie, using his natural charm and eloquence to capture her attention. After about a month, Carrie reciprocated his interest, and they began a regular affair, meeting in hotel rooms. Their relationship was intense and passionate, with a focus on experimentation and exploration. Carrie, a confident and mature woman, was flattered by the attention of the younger Michael. She was aware that Michael was unlikely to end his marriage for her. Michael, on the other hand, was eager to explore his desires with Carrie, which he felt he couldn't express with his wife. He would often lie to his wife about working late or attending corporate events, while confiding in Carrie about his unhappy marriage and his desire to divorce. However, he never made any concrete moves to end his marriage. The affair lasted for over a year, with Carrie seemingly content with the arrangement. She made no demands from Michael to leave his wife and was satisfied with their clandestine meetings and the excitement they brought. Carrie's behavior changed as she started dressing more conservatively, covering her body with long sleeves and high-necked clothing, a departure from her usual style that highlighted her athletic build. Carrie confided in her close friend about her lover Michael's extreme intimate experiments, which often crossed a line. She showed her friend the evidence, a bite mark on her chest and bruises on her neck from his intense grip. There were also marks on her wrists from the ropes he used to tie her up, giving him complete control. The friend was alarmed and urged Carrie to report the incidents to the police, but Carrie refused, explaining that the acts were consensual and Michael usually warned her about what he was going to do. However, the intensity of the experiences often got out of hand. For instance, Michael enjoyed choking his partner, claiming it would enhance the experience, but there were times when Carrie lost consciousness due to his excessive enthusiasm. Carrie's friend was fearful of Michael's strangulation games, but Carrie consistently gave in to his persuasion, believing that he would eventually stop or that she would become desensitized to the experience. Sadly, neither Carrie nor any of Michael's mistresses made any attempt to stop his cruel and painful experiments. Vicky had suspicions about her Michael's infidelity even before they got married. She believed that her love and care could change him and make him a devoted family man. However, after the wedding, his cheating continued and even worsened. When Michael denied his infidelity, Vicky decided to investigate on her own. One night, while Michael was asleep, Vicky checked his phone and found numerous intimate conversations with other women, including Carrie. She was shocked to discover that Michael had exchanged explicit photos with some of these women. The discovery was devastating for Vicky, and she packed her bags and temporarily moved in with a friend. Vicky kept her situation a secret from her family, fearing their reaction. She was afraid that her religious relatives would pressure her to get a divorce if they found out about Michael's adultery. Despite her heartbreak, Vicky still loved Michael and didn't want to give up on their marriage. Before leaving, she wrote him a heartfelt letter, confessing her love and telling him that he was the most important person in her life. Michael's wife had finally had enough of his promiscuous and decided to leave him. Before she went, she wrote him a handwritten note explaining that she knew about his cheating and couldn't take it anymore. She left the note on the refrigerator and gave him time to think about his actions, but made it clear that she wouldn't file for divorce just yet. Despite his wife's departure, Michael didn't seem to be particularly upset or remorseful. However, he did realize that he would miss having a quiet and submissive partner who took care of the household and tolerated his behavior. He decided to try to win her back and followed her to her friend's house, bringing a large bouquet of flowers. He apologized and begged her to return, promising to be faithful from then on. His wife, Vicky, wanted to believe him and decided to give him another chance. For a while, Michael made an effort to be more considerate and even came home for dinner. He deleted his correspondence with his mistress, Carrie, and changed his social media password to avoid suspicion. However, Michael's good behavior didn't last long. He soon started pursuing a new female employee, Karen Wilson, who was engaged to be married. Despite her initial reluctance, Michael persisted in his pursuit of her, and they began an affair. Meanwhile, he continued to see Carrie on the side, juggling multiple relationships at once. He became infatuated with a new woman and ended his relationship with 33-year-old Carrie Hall after 2 months, as he had grown tired of her. He told Karen a fabricated story about being unhappy in his marriage and claimed he was willing to leave his wife for her. Karen believed him, and they had an intimate encounter in the office. A week later, she ended her engagement, expecting Michael to follow through on his promise. Michael had no intention of divorcing his wife, Vicky, but he wanted to keep his new mistress. To keep her happy, he lied to her, telling her that he had already filed for divorce and was living with his parents. However, Vicky soon became suspicious that Michael was still cheating on her. She decided to take action and gathered evidence of his adultery. While Michael was in the shower, Vicky took his phone but found nothing incriminating because he had deleted all his text messages and changed his social media password. Undeterred, she waited until he fell asleep and then took his work laptop, where she found his social media account still logged in. There, she discovered messages between Michael and his new girlfriend, in which he professed his love and claimed to be divorcing Vicky and living with his parents. Vicky was shocked and took screenshots of the messages as proof of Michael's infidelity. She also found receipts for hotel rooms in his wallet. The next morning, she confronted Michael, presenting him with the evidence adultery. For the first time in their relationship, she lost her temper. Michael was taken aback and tried to apologize, promising it would never happen again. However, Vicky threatened to tell his parents about his infidelity, hoping they could talk some sense into him since she couldn't. Michael was enraged by his wife Vicky's threat to tell his parents about their problems. In a fit of anger, he slapped her. Vicky then got up and said she would go to his parents immediately, heading for the door. Michael caught up to her, grabbed a heavy jewelry box from the dresser, and hit her in the head twice, knocking her unconscious. He then strangled her with his bare hands until she stopped breathing. Feeling no remorse, Michael wrapped Vicky's body in a blanket, placed it in large garbage bags, and carried it to the garage. He quickly cleaned the house, packed up most of Vicky's belongings, and removed them. He then invited his lover, Karen, over, and they had dinner, had fun, and made love in the same bedroom where the murder had taken place. The next day, Michael ran off with Karen. He told his parents that Vicky had left him for another man, even showing them fake messages from Vicky's phone, which he had sent himself. He went to his parents' home, sobbing on his mother's shoulder, pretending to be distraught over his wife's supposed infidelity. Michael sent his parents-in-law messages saying that their daughter had left him for another man. He also told them to give her space and not to bother her. The messages claimed that Vicky had fallen out of love with Michael and had moved in with someone else. Her parents were shocked and tried to contact Vicky to hear her side of the story, but she refused to answer their calls, only responding with messages asking for time. Vicky's parents found Michael's story suspicious and went to his house to confront him. However, his explanation only raised more questions. They soon discovered that Vicky had not shown up for work, which further alarmed them. They decided to report their concerns to the police, leading to an investigation. On December 1, 2009, Michael bought a shovel, rope, rags, and cleaning supplies from a hardware store. However, the police arrived at his house on the same day. He had been caught before he could dispose of a body. The police initially found nothing out of the ordinary, but Michael's actions and alibi sparked suspicion and raised several questions. Notably, they overlooked a large package in the garage during their search. Inside the house, they found no signs of her presence, such as clothes, documents, or personal items, which could suggest she had left of her own accord. However, Vicky's laptop was discovered in the bedroom, and upon seizing it, the police found screenshots of Michael's incriminating conversations with his mistresses, which Vicky had saved. The investigation took a significant turn when authorities made a geolocation request to Vicky's cell phone, which had been regularly sending messages to her husband and relatives. To everyone's surprise, the phone was found to be located in the marital home of Vicky and Michael. This led to a second, more thorough search of the Roberts residence. During this search, a suspicious package was discovered in the garage, and its contents shocked all who were present. However, in a stunning twist, Michael, who had been cooperating with the police, suddenly vanished into thin air. He had taken a wallet containing cash, which allowed him to evade capture for several days. After his money ran out, Michael turned to one of his mistresses, Lavinia T., and asked if he could stay with her for a while. However, when Lavinia heard on the news that Michael was wanted for his wife's murder, she immediately contacted the police and reported his whereabouts. Eventually, he was arrested, put on trial, and convicted. When the authorities arrived to arrest Michael, he claiming he was innocent of the crime. A man claimed that his wife died accidentally during a consensual sex game where she asked him to strangle her with a rope belt, but he lost control. However, Forensic experts disputed this claim, finding that she was actually strangled with bare hands, attacked from behind, and had 2 severe head injuries that occurred before her death, which were unrelated to the alleged sex game. The trial began in January 2010, with the defendant, Michael Roberts, maintaining that his wife's death was an accident and hoping for a lenient sentence. However, the autopsy results revealed a different story. Roberts had intentionally hit his wife on the head twice, then strangled her, and hidden her body in the garage. As a result, Roberts was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nancy Paula Reyes. Nancy Paula Reyes Gores was born on April 13, 1991, in the small village of Granados in Guatemala. She grew up in a poor family with 4 siblings. Her parents, Jorge and Pren Gorzi, worked hard to provide for their children's education, hoping they could have a better life. Nancy attended school and later enrolled in the university in Delanua, where she studied business administration and document management. She was an exceptionally diligent student who earned top academic accolades. Despite her academic success, she struggled to find a promising career. During her studies, she worked as a cashier in a supermarket and was later promoted to administrator, but her career advancement stopped there. During her university years, Nancy was in a relationship with a young man and had 2 daughters. However, the relationship didn't work out, and they separated. The father did not financially support his children. Nancy continued to live with her parents, working at a supermarket, but saw no future prospects. With barely enough money for essentials, change was necessary. In 2013, her older sister moved to the United States, found a good job, got married, and settled well. Inspired by her sister's success, Nancy decided to transform her life. She chose to relocate to Europe, specifically Spain. At the time, she couldn't afford a one-way plane ticket or initial expenses. Nancy worked hard for years, saving enough to make her dream a reality. In July 2018, Nancy bought a ticket to Madrid, reassuring her parents that she would stay in touch regularly. Upon arrival, she planned to secure housing and a job. She brought a few thousand euros to cover initial expenses, such as renting a room and basic necessities, until she found stable employment. When Nancy left, she was 27 years old, and her daughters, who remained with their grandparents in Guatemala, were 7 and 5 years old. However, Nancy didn't stay in Madrid for long. She moved to Barcelona and later to Cadril, a city in the Spanish province of the same name. Nancy maintained regular contact with her family, calling home almost daily to check on their well-being and sending money back to support them. Despite not having a stable job, Nancy managed to make a living through various odd jobs, including cleaning for affluent families and caring for the elderly and sick. She never complained about her hardships. Instead, she told her family that Europe offered better opportunities and that she could earn more than she would have in her home country, even if she worked non-stop with no days off. It seemed Nancy was content with her lives. She even mentioned plans to bring her daughters to Spain once she had saved enough to rent a spacious home for the whole family. A significant romance developed in Nancy's life. Initially, she didn't reveal much about her personal life, citing a busy work schedule. However, in the spring of 2020, she told her parents that she had met a man named Carlos Andres Bustamante and started a romantic relationship with him. They met by chance while Nancy was searching for a new place to rent. As they navigated their challenges, they grew closer and eventually moved in together. Carlos, who was a year older than Nancy, didn't have a steady income at the start of their relationship and relied on odd jobs to get by. As a result, Nancy became the primary breadwinner, covering housing costs, bills, and often providing Carlos with money for his personal expenses. However, she never complained to her family about this, so they believed everything was fine and that she had found a good partner in Carlos, with whom she lived a happy and fulfilling life. Around that time, Nancy's two younger brothers also moved to Spain, and she kept in touch with them. She was especially close to her youngest brother, Dennis, who had met Carlos and thought he was likable. In late June 2020, Nancy and Carlos decided to relocate to Santander, a coastal city in northern Spain. When Nancy spoke to her family on the phone, she mentioned that the climate was better and there were more job opportunities. However, issues began to arise in her relationship with Carlos, which she tried to keep to herself. Carlos was jealous, hot-headed, and cruel. He was content with being financially supported by Nancy and lacked ambition. What's more, he had a problem with alcohol and occasionally used illicit substances. Although he frequently promised to quit and find a stable job, Nancy started to doubt whether she should continue the relationship. When Nancy discovered she was pregnant, Carlos seemed overjoyed and promised a better life. However, his behavior worsened. He continued to drink and use drugs, taking money from Nancy or his mother. Carlos also started physically abusing Nancy, who tried to hide this from others. On August 12, while Nancy video chatted with her parents, Carlos yelled at her, demanding that she tell him who she was talking to. Despite her explanation, he snatched the phone, verified the caller, and then threw the phone onto a chair before walking away. The next day, Carlos repeated this behavior, grabbing the phone from Nancy while she spoke to her family. He insulted and threatened her, leaving Nancy frightened. However, she told her relatives that Carlos's behavior was due to jealousy and insisted that everything was fine. Her parents urged her to contact the police, but Nancy believed she could handle the situation herself. On August 17, Nancy had a concerning phone conversation with her sister. She stated that if anything happened to her, Carlos would be responsible. Although her words were alarming, she didn't explain further and instead asked her sister to care for her children if necessary. This was the last time Nancy's sister heard from her. Nancy, who was pregnant, mysteriously vanished on August 20th. At around 2 p.m., she texted her father, promising to call later that evening, but she never did. It was unusual for her not to follow through on her promise or respond to her family's calls. When her family tried to contact Carlos, he didn't answer his phone either. The situation was worrying, especially since they had recently moved to Santander and had no friends there. Nancy's brothers lived on the other side of the country, making it difficult for them to check on her immediately. A few days later, a suspicious message was sent from Carlos's phone, stating that he and Nancy had argued and decided to separate. According to the message, Nancy had packed her belongings and left to find her own apartment, was ignoring Carlos's calls, and he had no idea where she was. Nancy brothers suggested that Carlos come to Ciudad Real so they could report Nancy missing to the police together. Carlos agreed but didn't show up or file the report. He also stopped communicating with Nancy's family. Nancy's relatives reported her disappearance to the police themselves. Meanwhile, her brothers found Carlos's mother's, Sandra Bustamante, address through Nancy's friends. When they visited Sandra and explained the situation, she burst into tears. She confessed that she suspected her son was capable of harming Nancy, but didn't provide any details. Sandra didn't know where Carlos and Nancy were. Carlos wouldn't answer her calls, only sending brief messages telling her not to ask questions and to give him time. The next day, Sandra is questioned at the police station about Nancy's disappearance and the whereabouts of her son, Carlos. Sandra shared the same information she had told Nancy's brothers the day before and showed the police a long text message Nancy had sent her before she went missing. In the message, Nancy begged Sandra not to give Carlos any money, no matter what sad stories he might tell her. Nancy said Carlos would spend the money on alcohol and drugs, which made him aggressive and cruel. He had no intention of finding a job or overcoming his addictions, and his behavior was becoming increasingly threatening. As a result, Nancy was considering leaving him and thought it would be better to end things before anyone got hurt. The investigation also uncovered a disturbing fact about Carlos. He had been convicted of causing physical harm several times before. One of his first victims was his own mother, whom he severely beat when he was 17 years old. At the time, he was given probation. However, after leaving his family's home, he served short sentences for assaulting women he lived with and tried to have relationships with. The investigation was just getting underway, but within the first few days, several intriguing details came to light that suggested the union between Carlos and Nancy was troubled from the start. Carlos had a history of aggression, was unemployed, struggled with addiction, had a criminal record, and was prone to uncontrollable rage. Nancy's occupation wasn't as straightforward as she claimed. Her work generated substantial income, more than a housekeeper or caregiver could earn. In reality, Nancy offered escort services to wealthy individuals, including Spanish and other tourists, which is why she moved to Santander. Carlos initially accepted Nancy's occupation as it supported them financially. However, upon learning of her pregnancy, he became consumed by doubts about the child's paternity and grew intensely jealous of her continued work. His behavior became erratic, fluctuating between forbidding her from interacting with men and pressuring her to work for money. The man spent the money he took from his mother solely on himself and his vices. A disturbing discovery was made in a rented apartment, where Nancy and Carlos had been missing for nearly a week. Although Carlos had been in contact, he only sent messages and didn't reveal his location. On August 26, the police finally obtained a warrant to search their empty rental apartment in Santander, and what they found was shocking, leaving no doubt that Nancy was deceased. Blood was found throughout the apartment, with some attempts to clean it up. However, it was still visible in many areas. Further investigation revealed fragments of bones, hair, skin, and internal organs in the clogged drains of the bathroom and toilet. Forensic analysis confirmed that these remains belonged to the missing woman, Nancy. Although Nancy's body was not found in the apartment, evidence suggested that she had been brutally murdered and dismembered in the bathroom. Her remains were likely disposed of elsewhere. Carlos became the prime suspect in the case, but his whereabouts were unknown. A package for a small hatchet was found in the apartment with Carlos' clear fingerprints on it. Security footage from a local hardware store showed Carlos purchasing the hatchet, rubber gloves, and large trash bags on August 20th. He bought a small cart from an elderly vendor, who instantly recognized him from a photo. This led to his arrest and the start of a search for the body. The next day, Carlos went to a police station in Madrid. Trying to deflect suspicion from himself, he went to report Nancy missing but was immediately arrested as the main suspect in the gruesome crime. Carlos claimed he had no involvement, stating that he and Nancy had argued and parted ways on August 20th. He said he left the town in an emotional state and was unaware of any events involving Nancy afterward. He suggested that Nancy might have been attacked when she returned to the apartment to gather her belongings. However, his story was unconvincing, especially after police found his fingerprints on the hatchet packaging. In the following days, police thoroughly searched nearby wastelands, sewer systems, and the coastline with the help of dogs, but found no sign of Nancy. They then tracked Carlos's movements from August 20th to 26th using his mobile phone signals. The results showed he spent 3 days traveling along the coast, visiting the cities of Bilbao and Burgos before heading to Madrid. It was evident that Carlos attempted to conceal his actions. The investigation continued in Santander. On August 20th, surveillance footage revealed Carlos walking towards a large natural forest park in the evening. He returned to his apartment late at night and then exited again with a cart containing irregularly shaped bags. Carlos vanished from view upon entering the wooded area due to limited camera coverage. He reappeared later with a much lighter cart. After proceeding towards the railway tracks, he returned significantly lighter, indicating where the body might be. However, one question remained unanswered: where was the child? It wasn't until September 16th that authorities discovered bags containing severely decomposed human remains in dense underbrush on a hillside. The remains were identified as those of the missing Nancy Gores, which had been divided into 20 parts using a hatchet, as revealed by security camera footage. While all items transported in the cart were recovered, something was still missing. Nancy's 4-month-old fetus was not found among the remains. The victim's genitals and lower abdomen showed severe injuries from a knife and hatchet. This suggests that the perpetrator removed the fetus and got rid of it separately from the mother's body. Carlos denied being involved and gave conflicting statements. He tried to blame someone else, but the victim's blood was found on his clothes and shoes, which he had tried to wash off. Even though Carlos wouldn't admit to the crime, investigators figured out what happened. Experts think that on the afternoon of August 20th, the man got into an argument with his pregnant partner. He then brutally beat and strangled her in the kitchen, where blood was found on the floor and walls. Carlos moved Nancy's body to the bathroom. Afterward, he went shopping at a hardware store and the market. Using a hatchet and a large kitchen knife, he divided Nancy's body into 20 parts in the bathroom. He placed the pieces into bags, loaded everything into a cart, and then went to the park to look for secluded places to dispose of the body. Late at night, he followed a pre-planned route deep into the park, scattering the bags in various locations, hoping they would never be found. During his trial, Carlos denied his guilt and claimed he loved Nancy. The whereabouts of the fetus he removed from her body remain unknown. From the time of the crime until his arrest in Madrid, Carlos lived off the money he stole from Nancy. He spent the money daily in bars across various cities. It took law enforcement nearly 2 years to investigate, gather evidence, and find witnesses, and the murder trial is scheduled to start in July 2022. In November of the same year, Carlos was found guilty of the premeditated, brutal murder of Nancy and her unborn child, as well as the dismemberment and desecration of her body. However, many considered the sentence handed down to the murderer to be too lenient. Carlos received a prison sentence of 25 years and 6 months. He was also required to pay 150,000 euros in compensation to Nancy's parents and daughters. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lindsay Birbeck. Lindsay was born in Blackburn, Lancashire, northwest England. She and her husband, Tim Birbeck, separated in July 2018, but they continued living together until March 2019. At that time, Lindsay moved to a new home on Burnley Road in Hanko. As a mother, Lindsay cared for her 2 adult children, Divin, 20, and Sarah, 17. Professionally, she worked as a teacher's aide at Atton Hill Elementary School in Burnley. She enjoyed being around children and was known for her artistic talent. Lindsay would often go the extra mile to create impressive props for school productions. On August 12, Lindsay went for a walk in the wooded area of Coppice, near her Hanko home. However, when her daughters Sarah and Sarah's boyfriend Brandon arrived at the house for a scheduled tea party, Lindsay was nowhere to be found. This was unusual, as Lindsay was not one to forget appointments. Sarah tried calling Lindsay multiple times, but there was no answer. She sent Lindsay a text message saying, "Where are you? We sat outside for an hour and called 6 times." When Lindsay didn't respond, Sarah sent another message with a series of question marks, but still received no reply. After waiting for an hour outside Lindsay's house, Sarah called her father, Tim Birbeck, since her mother was not home and not answering her phone. Tim took Sarah and her brother Brandon to his house around midnight. Later, Sarah and Tim went back to Lindsay's house with a spare set of keys, but Lindsay was nowhere to be found. The house looked undisturbed, and there were no signs of anything out of the ordinary or a note explaining Lindsay's whereabouts. At 12:11 a.m. on August 13th, Tim contacted the police to report Lindsay missing, stating, "Lindsay seems to be missing. We can't find her." Lindsay's disappearance shocked the community, prompting a massive search effort. Hundreds of people, including families with strollers and teenagers, joined the search, even if they didn't know Lindsay personally. After days of searching, posting on social media, and putting up posters, the community gathered at a local spot called Courteous for 2 days, hoping to find a clue to help solve the mystery of Lindsay's disappearance. The search continued non-stop despite the challenges. Thousands of posters with Lindsay's picture were distributed throughout the neighborhood. A Facebook group to aid the search gained 10,000 members. Posters soon appeared everywhere, including lamp posts, storefronts, and traffic lights, asking for help in finding Lindsay. Police launched a thorough investigation into Lindsay's disappearance, conducting extensive searches around her house and the surrounding countryside. A team of specialists, including police officers, dog handlers, firefighters, and mountain rescue volunteers, scoured the area. They also deployed drones and helicopters to cover a wide range, including popular walking and running routes. For days after Lindsay went missing, police released CCTV footage showing her last seen walking along Burnley Road towards Courteous at 4:10 p.m. She was wearing a distinctive purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As a week passed since her disappearance, hopes of finding Lindsay alive began to dwindle. Despite the efforts of the police, her whereabouts remained a mystery. However, the police emphasized that there was no evidence to suggest she was the victim of a crime, leaving a glimmer of hope that she might still be found alive. That evening, hundreds of local residents joined forces for the first mass public search of Courteous, following a rallying call on social media. A local resident's dog ran into the woods at Errington Cemetery, prompting its owner to follow. The dog didn't respond to its owner's calls, instead hiding its head in the bushes and sniffing at something. As the owner approached, they felt something soft underfoot, which frightened them. A terrible smell and swarming flies surrounded a plastic bag, with what appeared to be a foot visible. On August 24th, Lindsay Bobek's body was discovered 12 days after her disappearance. Her naked body was buried in the cemetery, wrapped in 2 clear plastic bags and mixed with earth and grass, in a shallow grave. With this discovery, the search for Lindsay Bobek was concluded, and a murder investigation officially began. Pathologist Dr. Naomi Carter conducted an autopsy and found that the cause of death was a broken neck, likely caused by a forceful blow from a foot or knee. The trauma was so severe that the entire larynx was crushed. Additionally, it appeared that someone had attempted to cut off the right leg after death, possibly using a saw, leaving a large laceration that cut down to the bone. Due to the poor condition of the body, Dr. Carter had difficulty determining the full extent of the injuries. While she couldn't rule out the possibility of sexual activity on the day of the disappearance, the level of decomposition made it impossible to confirm. Before the body was found, the area had been searched by police and community volunteers for several days, but nothing was discovered. A blue wheelie garbage can was spotted in nearby bushes, but its significance was not yet realized at that stage of the investigation. Volunteers searched the cemetery on August 20th at 9 p.m. and found a dumpster with a dark stain that they suspected might be blood. They took pictures and called the police, who arrived to inspect the dumpster. However, the police officers thought the dark stain was just dirt and noted that the dumpster looked new. With no evidence linking it to Lindsay's disappearance, they left it in place. Other clues were found in the cemetery but weren't immediately considered significant. Christine Alderson, a local resident, discovered a bloody cloth on the grass on August 18th while walking her dogs. She believed the blood was fresh but thought it might belong to a homeless man who often visited the area. Judith Bibby, another dog walker, reported seeing what was likely Lindsay's jacket hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cardiel Hill Trail. On August 25, investigators returned to the crime scene and discovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave. The gloves had blood on them and were sent for forensic testing. The test results showed that the gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside and Lindsay's DNA on the outside of the left glove. Additionally, investigators found a pair of Lindsay's Skechers sneakers in a blue plastic bag in the cemetery. The shoes had been cut along the sole. Further examination revealed that Lindsay's body was wrapped in plastic sheeting, with foliage and grass that didn't match the cemetery grounds between her body and the sheeting. This led investigators to believe that Lindsay's body had been moved from another location. The discovery of the moved body led detectives to recall a blue trash can that had caught the attention of volunteers. Upon reviewing CCTV footage, police officers made a surprising discovery that left the investigation team perplexed. Several images showed a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area over the course of a few days. A CCTV camera caught the same individual returning to the cemetery on 4 separate occasions. This footage helped identify a suspect. A video of the young man carrying a trash can down the street, possibly containing Lindsay's body, gained widespread attention. The video was broadcast on the news with a request for help identifying the individual, which proved successful. The individual in the video was identified as Rocky Marciano Rocky, a local resident who lived with his parents and 5 siblings on Winnie Hill Road in Arrington. The Rocky family had resided in this home for approximately 3 decades. Rocky struggled with a range of mental health issues, including autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity, which he had experienced since childhood. Additionally, his low IQ presented challenges with learning and communication. Rocky attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick several days a week, where teachers described him as a quiet and nonverbal student. In 2015, a psychologist evaluated Rocky and found he had difficulty understanding his emotions and how they related to events. A 2016 report noted that Rocky was unresponsive to strangers and required constant supervision. According to Timothy Bradley, a teacher at his school, Rocky showed little interest in academics, preferring practical activities. He rarely engaged in conversations, even about topics that interested him. Rocky was physically strong and enjoyed activities like going to the gym, caring for chickens, and playing Xbox. Rocky often seemed detached from reality and unaware of his actions. His attack on Lindsay Bubeck appeared to be motivated by a desire to kill a woman, and she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The murder was a random act committed by a stranger. On August 12, 2020, 1 year after the crime, Rocky Marciano Rocky went on trial. After an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict. Rocky, 17, showed no reaction via video link from Her Majesty's Prison, Wetherby. His parents, present in court, also remained expressionless. Rocky had pleaded guilty to aiding in the disposal of Lindsay's body but denied any role in her death. He claimed a male stranger approached him and offered a fee to help bury she. In a prepared statement, Rocky admitted to moving the garbage can and burying the body, but maintained he had no involvement in Lindsay's death. However, evidence collected from his home in Arrington, including identical plastic bags found at Lindsay's grave and a tracksuit matching the one he wore in surveillance footage from August 12, 16, and 17, contradicted his claims. Defense attorney Mark Van Hull stated to the jurors that although Rocky committed a reprehensible act by burying her body in the cemetery, he maintains that Rocky was not responsible for her death, despite the substantial evidence against him. The judge sentenced Rocky to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. He will be eligible for release only when the parole board determines he is no longer a danger to society. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, and stated that Rocky clearly intended to kill a woman who was walking in the area just minutes before Lindsay's murder. Security footage shows that Rocky Price made 2 return visits to the location where Lindsay was killed on the evening of August 12. At 6:55 p.m., he was captured on CCTV carrying a black backpack, likely containing a saw to dismember the victim's body. At 8:28 p.m., he was seen at the same location, where he would eventually dispose of the body. With no visible signs of panic or distress, Rocky Price carried out a calculated plan to dispose of Lindsay's body. He carefully placed it in a blue trash can, wrapping it in 2 plastic bags, before burying it in a shallow grave at Arrington Cemetery. The fact that he stalked another woman before killing Lindsay Bebek indicates that his crime was premeditated, rather than a spontaneous loss of control. Lindsay's funeral took place at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th. Over 200 people attended the service, which was briefly interrupted by police stopping traffic on Manchester Road to allow Lindsay's coffin, adorned with flowers, to be carried into the church. The scene was filled with dozens of bouquets from friends, family,